A forest guard found an abandoned baby in a basket during a cold night and brought him home. When he heard the lullaby, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The road appears on screen as a grayish line sliding between dark fields and shimmering puddles. It is a desolate night, framed by a fine, constant rain that barely reveals the horizon. Helena's car headlights are trembling beams of light reflected on the wet asphalt and the drops that burst on the windshield. The soundtrack is reduced to the muffled thumps of the engine, the patter of water against the glass, and the irregular hum of the windshield wipers, which struggle in vain to clear the view. Inside the vehicle, Helena grips the steering wheel tightly. Her face is pale, tense, her eyes narrowed by recent anger and a concern she does not wish to name. She has accelerated too much, driven by a rage or pain the viewer is yet to uncover. Gabriel, in the passenger seat, leans toward her anxiously. "Please slow down. It's not safe with this rain." His voice is a whisper loaded with fear and plea. But Helena does not respond, lost in her own demons. The storm worsens, visibility decreases, and Helena's hands, clenched on the wheel, do not relent. Suddenly, something breaks the veil of water. A blurry silhouette appears in the middle of the road. An elderly man on a bicycle, his slender body and vehicle barely a trembling stain under the rain. Everything happens in a heartbeat. Helena slams on the brake, the screeching tires tearing the air, but it's useless. There is a dull, brief, yet infinite thud. The old man's body flies over the hood before crashing onto the asphalt with a dry, atrocious sound. For a second, the world stands still. Gabriel reacts first. He pushes the car door open and steps out into the curtain of icy water. His footsteps splash in small puddles as he kneels beside the elderly man. The headlights slide over the injured man's clothes, illuminating him with a yellowish, almost spectral hue. The man groans softly, a sign of pain that could be endless. Gabriel tries to speak to him, call his name, notice any movement, something that would indicate there is still hope. Helena exits the car with trembling legs. Her hands cover her mouth, her gaze wide-eyed. Tears fill her eyes as her voice breaks the night's dampness. "What have I done? My God, what have I done?" Her lament is an echo muffled by the rain. Gabriel shouts, "Call an ambulance, quickly!" Helena brings a trembling hand to her pocket, searching for her phone. She pulls it out, but the drops and her shaking make dialing difficult. Her gaze, however, does not rest on the injured man, but on Gabriel. Her face shows horror, but also a deeper panic, the fear of the consequences. Between sobs, Helena murmurs, "If they find out it was me, I'll go to prison. It will destroy my life, my reputation." Gabriel, perplexed, looks at her in disbelief. His voice comes out strangled. "What are you talking about? A man is injured." But Helena's mind is elsewhere. The rain intensifies. The drops seem like frozen crystals on her face. She steps toward Gabriel, clings to his arm desperately, her voice a frantic whisper. "You don't understand, Gabriel. I'm pregnant." That announcement hits him like an electric shock. His gaze dissolves in confusion. His heart races. He cannot process the mix of terror, worry, and love that this single sentence brings. Helena sobs, her nails digging into Gabriel's coat sleeve. "Please, you have to help me. Take the blame. Say you were driving. If I go to jail, our child, we can't allow it." Gabriel feels the world tilt beneath his feet. He loves Helena, or at least he believed he did. He has bet his life on her side, and now must choose between the truth and sacrifice. Her tears, the promise of a life growing inside her, disarm him. He feels a bitter taste in his mouth, a knot in his throat. "All right, I'll do it," he finally says, almost voiceless. In the background, the sirens of an approaching ambulance can be heard, a metallic howl piercing the night. The elderly man remains lying on the asphalt, surrounded by puddles reflecting distant lights. Helena slowly retreats toward the car, while Gabriel stays beside the injured man, soaked, paralyzed between fear and misunderstood loyalty. The first image that appears is a brutal contrast to the rainy night of the accident. Now, the courtroom is a dry space, devoid of any empathy or color. Gabriel sits in the defendant's bench, handcuffed, with his back tense. A cold, white spotlight shines on his head, highlighting the fatigue on his face. The rest of the room is shrouded in gray twilight that offers no refuge. Around him, murmurs and the occasional creak of chairs. Some journalists scribble notes in silence. The victims' relatives whisper among themselves. The prosecutor meticulously organizes papers. Nothing breaks the rigidity of the moment. Gabriel turns his head, searching for a familiar figure, a known face. But neither Helena nor Elliot Smith is there. No one who ever smiled at him in his previous life appears to support him now. The prosecutor, a man with a firm voice and confident gestures, presents the evidence with cutting precision. There are no hesitations or compassionate pauses. Every key word echoes in Gabriel's mind. Recklessness, manslaughter, moral flight. He feels those phrases pierce his chest like hooks. On the other side, his defense attorney, a man in a grey suit, neutral expression and dry manners, barely utters monosyllables. His interventions are routine, without passion or genuine intent to convince. Gabriel blinks in disbelief. Where did the promise of help go, the strength he expected from the great Elias, his influential father-in-law? Gabriel tries again to find Helena among the audience. Shouldn't she be there, scared but present, accompanying him? Didn't she promise that everything would be clarified, that she wouldn't leave him alone? Gabriel's gaze wanders. His breath grows denser. He only sees strange and curious faces, some stern, others indifferent. The prosecutor finishes his presentation, and the judge, with a stony face and unchanging eyes, takes the floor. She does not hesitate to read the verdict. The sentence, recited in a monotone voice, fills the room with an unbearable weight. Guilty. 4 years in prison. There is no visible shock, only a heavy, suffocating silence. In Gabriel's mind, the roar is deafening. He feels vertigo, a moral nausea. He lowers his head, closes his eyes. At what point did his life become this nightmare? Suddenly, in his mind, flashbacks slice through the scene like filigree in negative. Helena smiling on a terrace with soft lights, toasting with him in a glass of wine. Elliot shaking his hand and congratulating him on his hiring, showing him a path to success. Gabriel's vibrant voice calling Cecilia, his mother, with the excitement of a promising future. Loose, bright, warm images clash against the present grey and merciless courtroom. Upon opening his eyes, the spotlights, the foreign gazes, the murmur of the audience, and the hiss of pens on notebooks surround him again. Incredulity transforms into a question that pierces him. How did I end up in this hell? And that question finds only emptiness. The courtroom door shuts, guards escort him, the handcuffs feel heavier than the metal. Gabriel does not feel anger yet, only bewilderment and immense sadness. His face reflects more than fear. It is the expression of someone who has just discovered the cold dimension of betrayal and abandonment. The courtroom, impassive, seems to lower the curtain on the first great defeat of his life. Without a goodbye, without a helping hand, Gabriel sinks into an uncertain destiny, with silent pain and the certainty that nothing will ever be the same again. The image lights up with the first glimmers of sun over Puerto Ancla, a tiny town, almost a whisper by the sea, where the salty breeze mixes with the smell of damp nets. The camera pans the modest beach, dotted with fishing boats painted in colors faded by salt and time. The cry of seagulls tears through the warm silence of dawn. Gabriel, with a simple suitcase in one hand, stops in front of his mother, Cecilia. She, with a face weathered by the sea wind and daily toil, extends her calloused palm, to give him a small amulet. A wooden pendant, with the blurred outline of a clam, or perhaps a fish. Her gaze is that of someone who has given everything for her children. Diana, Gabriel's younger sister, clings to their mother's arm, her eyes moist. Her brother is about to leave for the big city in search of a better future. "I promise I'll come back," Gabriel says, his voice a bit cracked. "I'll return to this place, and when I do, things will be different. We'll have a new house, no more leaks, and I'll bring opportunities for everyone." Cecilia nods in silence, her lips forming a hopeful smile. Diana clings to her neck in a short but intense hug, holding back tears she can't fully release. The dawn light paints the trio in golden hues, like a miniature fresco of resilience. Then, Gabriel walks away down the sandy street, the suitcase softly knocking against his leg. Behind him, the murmur of the waves and his mother's soft voice calling after him. "Don't forget about us, son." The transition is abrupt. The camera jumps to Ciudad Brisa, where skyscrapers scrape grey clouds, traffic murmurs with a metallic hum, and the air smells of hot asphalt. Gabriel, nervous but determined, crosses the glass doors of the Smith building. Shiny marble in the lobby, smooth escalators, walls adorned with modern paintings. The contrast with Puerto Ancla is total. Here everything is rhythm, cosmopolitan neatness, ambition, framed in glass and concrete. Elliot Smith himself approaches Gabriel, an elegantly poised man, impeccable suit, calculated smile. Placing a hand on his new employee's shoulder, he declares with a firm voice, "Gabriel, I expect great things from you. Your environmental training will be a pillar for our projects. We must integrate nature and development." These are words that sound convincing, like a caress of promises. Gabriel nods, motivated. He feels important, valuable. A few days later, in a small studio rented on the outskirts of the city, Gabriel dials his mother's number on an old mobile phone. Upon hearing Cecilia's familiar voice, his heart lights up. "Mom, I got the job. Mr. Smith trusts my sustainable ideas. He told me I will be able to design green solutions for his constructions." On the other end, Cecilia's voice breaks with joy and pride. She warns him not to get lost in the city, to call frequently, and not to forget to send a letter now and then. The murmur of the urban life is muffled through the window. Horns, distant sirens, the constant pulse of thousands of intertwined lives. In Gabriel's room, only the warmth of his mother's voice illuminates the thick air. After hanging up, Gabriel stands in front of the window. Far away, among the silhouettes of buildings, a faint blue line, the sea that saw him born, is discernible. The coastal breeze doesn't reach here, but he remembers it. For a moment, he closes his eyes and evokes Puerto Ancla. Diana's laughter, Cecilia's rough hands, the promise he left floating in the sand. When he opens them again, his gaze is filled with healthy ambition, with the naive faith that effort will bring prosperity, that honesty and hard work are guaranteed rewards. In that moment, he has no doubt about his destiny. He firmly believes he is planting the seeds of a dream that will flourish for him and his loved ones. And so, the camera bids farewell to his figure reflected in the glass, with hope intact on his face. The scene opens on an elegant corporate terrace, bathed in the soft light of the sunset. Large windows let in an orange glow that tints champagne flutes, subtle ties, and the shiny marble of the floor. Executives, partners, and businessmen gather in small groups, conversing softly, exchanging business cards and promises. In a corner, a jazz quartet plays soft melodies, a sophisticated whisper that blends with the murmur of conversations. Gabriel, wearing his first well-tailored suit, not expensive but neat and elegant, moves with a certain shyness among the guests. He feels like he's walking on unknown terrain, restrained laughter, measured expressions, talks about investments and corporate responsibility, tangled in a language he is just beginning to master. His heart beats a little faster than usual, aware of his new environment, of Elliot Smith's occasional glance, who seems to evaluate everyone with a calm smile. Suddenly, Elliot approaches with his dignified bearing and introduces him to a small group of colleagues. There, beside him, is Helena, his daughter. When their eyes meet, the rest of the room seems to blur. Helena has bright eyes, a natural elegance. Gabriel feels disarmed by her presence. Elliot, satisfied, retreats, allowing the young woman and the engineer to get acquainted. Helena, with genuine curiosity, or perfectly rehearsed, Gabriel will never know, asks about his work. He, somewhat nervous, talks about sustainable architecture, integrating the greenery of mangroves and the sea breeze into projects, designing buildings that breathe with the earth. His enthusiasm becomes almost naive, but Helena looks at him with interest, and a slight smile curves her lips. The sky, visible behind the panoramic window, displays orange, pink, and mauve colors that seem to paint a perfect backdrop for that first encounter. The following weeks pass like a carousel of pleasant moments. They stroll along the boardwalk at dusk, the sea reflecting the city's lights in a hypnotic ebb and flow. They dine in restaurants with privileged views, talking about trips they dream of taking, countries where sustainable construction is cutting edge, and ecological projects they might one day carry out together. Helena's voice is soft, her laughter gentle, and Gabriel feels understood, valued. The flame of admiration and love ignites without fanfare, but firmly. Elliot observes everything from a distance, pleased. To him, seeing Helena with an idealistic environmental engineer enriches his company's image to the world. It projects modernity, social awareness, a brand committed to the planet. It is the perfect narrative to elevate his reputation. Gabriel, naive and hopeful, interprets that paternal glance as sincere approval, a benevolent nod that makes him feel part of something important. As the romance blossoms, Gabriel's name begins to emerge in important conversations within the company. He is assigned more complex projects. His desk fills with sketches and models that combine glass, vegetation, and water pathways. Elliot mentions his work in front of shareholders, and colleagues congratulate him with private applause. Life becomes luminous, professional advancement, a romantic relationship with Helena that seems authentic, and a cloudless horizon. The event hall seems to float at height, thanks to immense windows that display the city in miniature under a night sprinkled with lights. Inside, an orchestra plays soft classical music, and the notes seem to caress the air scented with white flowers arranged in crystal vases. Guests dressed in formal attire converse in moderate tones, holding champagne glasses with impeccably cared-for fingers. In the center of the ballroom, Gabriel wears a perfectly tailored suit, his ivory tie matching Helena's dress, which dazzles in an elegant outfit with lace and clean lines. Both present a harmonious image, almost magazine-like. Gabriel smiles with such illusion that he almost lights up the room by himself. Between them floats the atmosphere of a transcendent day, their wedding. From a secluded table, Cecilia and Diana, who have arrived from Puerto Ancla, watch the spectacle with emotion and a touch of astonishment. Cecilia, with rough hands from years of work, wears a simple navy blue dress. Diana, younger, in a borrowed dress and nervous about the sophistication of the environment, incredulously observes the jewels that shine on the lady's wrists and the silk ties of the businessman. Both feel the vertigo of being in an alien world, but share the happiness of seeing Gabriel radiant, fulfilling dreams that once seemed impossible. Gabriel approaches his mother, embraces her tenderly. In his voice, there is pride and promise. "Mom, when everything gets better, I will bring you to the city and buy you a house. You will have an easier life, I promise." Cecilia nods, moved. No cloud clouds her faith in him. Diana looks around, stunned by the champagne glasses that shine like liquid gold and the moderated but sharp laughs of certain guests. Beyond, in discreet corridors, some murmur, "Who is this young provincial who has married Smith's daughter?" The Smith family knows what they're doing, nothing is by chance. Is it love or a convenient arrangement? Distrust reverberates in the gazes of ladies with pearl necklaces and executives with fine mustaches. But Gabriel does not perceive these whispering thorns. His gaze is fixed on Helena, who smiles sweetly, holding his hand with delicately studied gentleness. The music flows into a waltz. At the center of the dance floor, Gabriel and Helena spin, she in her ivory dress and he in the suit that Elliot Smith helped to finance. The camera glides through the ballroom, capturing a subtle tension that everyone seems to feel except Gabriel himself. The collision between his humble origins, represented by Cecilia and Diana, and the carefully calculated opulence that surrounds the Smith family and their allies. Cecilia, from her table, watches the scene with teary eyes. She only sees her son at the peak of his happiness, not imagining that there are invisible knots tangled among the polite smiles. Helena, radiant in the light of crystal chandeliers, dances with enviable elegance. Gabriel feels that nothing can go wrong, that the future is a fertile valley at his feet. At that precise moment, he considers himself the luckiest man in the world, unaware of the lies that have already begun to weave around him. The scene now lights up with a cold glow, the present imposing its harshness. The camera returns to that night of the accident, where the ambulance and patrol sirens tint the asphalt with intermittent blue. Gabriel, soaked to the bone, trembles from something more than the cold rain. The guilt he has blindly assumed weighs on him like a boulder on his chest. In front of him, an officer with a notebook in hand records the version of events that Gabriel repeats, almost in a trance. Every word comes out sparse, forced, because it is the story that incriminates him as the driver that night. A few meters away, the injured elderly man is being loaded onto a stretcher. The sound of metal closing the ambulance door echoes in Gabriel's ears. The rain continues to fall, persistent, as if the sky were crying for him. Moments later, a police officer approaches and asks him to get into the patrol car. Gabriel obeys with a desperate look, searching for Helena. She does not approach. She remains aside, protected by her lawyer's umbrella. "He will call you," Gabriel repeats to himself, trying to convince himself as the blue lights reflect on the wet windows. That night, at the police station, Gabriel waits for hours that feel like centuries. The humidity of his clothes chills his bones. Every minute that passes without Helena's arrival or Elliot's call is like a slow dagger sinking deeper and deeper. Why are they taking so long? He asks himself softly. Why isn't she coming? Tension accumulates at his neck. His hands tremble. Did Helena not promise to help him? Wasn't it for the sake of their supposed child that he had sacrificed himself? The scene changes with quick cuts, flashes that hurt the retina. A brief, austere trial filled with uncomfortable silences. Helena is nowhere to be seen. Her seat is empty. The court-appointed lawyer Gabriel has obtained seems more like an extra from the judicial stage than a real defender. Dry questions, formal arguments without passion. Elliot Smith's seat, the figure of power Gabriel believed he had on his side, also remains empty. Gabriel, sitting with his hands clasped, gradually understands that his heroic story, his sacrifice for Helena and the alleged child he was carrying, was nothing more than a lure. He recalls the subtle manipulation, the vague promises, Helena's feigned desperation for him to take the blame, the total absence of help, the calculated silence. Everything fits with a chilling cruelty. The suspicion that the pregnancy was a lie, a vile tactic to bend him, hits him like a cold wave. He feels his stomach contract, the world crumbling beneath his feet. His eyes search for an answer in the impassive faces of the courtroom. There is no mercy, no rescue. They have thrown him into the void and let him fall. Then he understands. He has been a victim of a deception as atrocious as it is methodical. As the judge delivers the sentence, Gabriel feels reality melting around him, leaving behind the bitter taste of betrayal and naivety. The light inside the cell is scarce and cold. A thin line of clarity filters through the barred window, marking a pale streak on the floor. Gabriel, with a thinner and more tired face than ever, sits on the bunk bed. He holds a letter that arrived weeks late in his hands. The wrinkled envelope, the smeared ink. When he finishes reading, his fingers tremble. His eyes remain still for a few moments. Cecilia, his mother, has died of a heart attack. There was no final call, no goodbye. The news hits violently, stripping away the absolute loneliness he finds himself in. He wants to cry, but the grief is so deep and dense that not even tears find a way out. He remembers his promise to return someday with improvements, with a fairer life for her. Now all that sacrifice, all his effort and humiliation feel empty. The silence of the cell becomes unbearable. He tries to mentally replay memories with Cecilia, her smile, the family amulet she gave him, the warmth of her voice on the phone. Now all that is dust in the wind. The guards walk down the hallway with slow steps. Gabriel looks up, a knot clenching his throat. Shortly after, a nearby inmate whispers to him, "Hey, I heard that your wife..." The phrases sound hollow, echoing in his mind. Helena has filed for divorce, the rumor says, confirmed by another stranger's glance. All while he languishes behind the bars. She has sold the apartment that Gabriel, with so much effort, helped to pay for. She has erased any economic ties that once connected them with a single stroke. Not a letter, not a visit, not an explanation. She has simply disappeared from his life. The cruelty does not feel like a single stab, but like 1,000 fine needles piercing his chest, back, and head. Prison, which was already a pit of guilt and helplessness, now becomes a bottomless abyss. The betrayal is absolute. His mother, dead without farewell. Helena, disappeared with premeditation and malice. Elias, the powerful father-in-law, did not lift a finger for him. Not a call, not a note. Nothing. Memories pierce his consciousness in fragments. He sees himself arriving in the big city, suitcase in hand, drunk with optimism. He sees himself shaking Elias's hand in an elegant office. He hears Helena's voice that evening with soft music, asking about his ecological projects and admiring his enthusiasm. He sees them dancing at their wedding, the naive smile he wore, oblivious to the invisible threads being woven around him. Each image is a flash that hurts, a testament to the perfect deception. The harshness of reality imposes itself without contemplation. Gabriel now understands that he was a pawn, a man without lineage, without resources, useful for masking the image of a wealthy family that played with his illusion. His love, his honesty, his vocation, all were used and then discarded like a broken tool. Time behind bars no longer feels like a simple legal sentence, but like the confirmation that the world he believed was good was rotten at its core. Bitterness climbs up his chest until it settles in his eyes, jaw, and breath. He never thought he would feel such thick bile. The prison walls rise higher, more oppressive. With the wrinkled letter in his fist, Gabriel closes his eyes. They have stripped him of everything: his freedom, his family, his dreams. All that remains is a dull hatred, the devastating certainty of having been betrayed mercilessly. And so, with a frozen heart, he accepts the bitter truth. His naivety was the feast that others devoured coldly. Prison is its own universe, a realm suspended from time and the outside world, where day and night are differentiated more by prison routines than by sunlight. As months pass, Gabriel becomes accustomed to this parallel world. He learns to move discreetly, to watch his words, to keep his back against the wall in the hallways and yard, and to maintain a steady gaze without showing fear. It is a silent adaptation. Gabriel is no longer the naive man who arrived in the city with dreams of sustainability and love. He is a survivor, forced to rebuild himself within grey walls. He is surrounded by men hardened by the harshness of the cells, some toughened by violence, others withdrawn into themselves. Among them, Roque, an inmate with a wrinkled face and a calm gaze, offers him a moral anchor. One afternoon, while cleaning the yard, Roque approaches and murmurs, "Don't let hatred consume you. Channel it. Use it for something useful. Here, if you wallow in resentment, you only devour yourself." Gabriel nods in silence. He finds no words but understands the lesson. At night, under the dim light of a bulb, he takes out an old worn pencil and scraps of paper he has been collecting. He draws tirelessly, sketches of buildings integrated into nature, green terraces, solar panels, rainwater collection systems. His mind soars to landscapes he cannot see from the cell, but remembers vividly. Sometimes he traces curves and shapes, thinking of the wetlands he once wanted to protect so much. As the graphite scratches the dirty paper, Gabriel feels he keeps a spark of his true self alive. Each stroke is a form of resistance. He holds the amulet his mother, Cecilia, gave him. He strokes it with his fingertips, remembering the warmth of her voice, the promise of a better future. That promise failed spectacularly in the face of human cruelty, but it has not been completely extinguished. Gabriel keeps it inside, beyond the pain, beyond the fury. Now it is a silent vow, a note that resonates in his mind. He will not give up. Mornings are monotonous, roll calls, tasteless food, the watchful eyes of guards. But Gabriel holds on to the thought that this will not be his end. Every day behind bars is a lesson in patience and adaptation. His muscles harden with hours of improvised exercise. His mind sharpens with reading old newspapers, with brief talks with Roque. His anger, once uncontrolled, is now a blade sheathed in a scabbard, waiting for the right moment. Over time, Gabriel fully understands his greatest mistake: blind trust, the naivety that led him to sacrifice everything for people who did not deserve it. He vows that, if he ever regains his freedom, he will no longer be dazzled by false promises or elegant facades. He will own his destiny, protect those who need it, but without losing himself in illusion, without being a piece in the game of the powerful. In the dimness of the cell, the pencil wears down once more against the paper, drawing a tree sprouting from the roof of an imaginary building. And in that stroke, Gabriel forges his new character, tempered by pain, but ready to resist and be reborn. The heavy metal door slides open with a rough sound. The echo resounds in the prison corridor until it fades into the open air. Gabriel crosses the threshold with slow steps, holding a plastic bag containing his humble clothes and a couple of wrinkled papers. He wears a faded shirt, old shoes, and a wooden amulet hanging from his neck. Looking up, the sun hurts him with its intense, almost forgotten light. The city murmurs a few meters away with its indifferent bustle. No one waits for him outside. There are no open arms, no friends, no family, nor the silhouette of Helena, nor the proud figure of Elias. Only busy passers-by, impatient honking cars, and street vendors who do not look up. Gabriel observes the billboards, the glass facades, the routine indifferent to the drama he lived. The air has a strange taste, a mix of smoke and oblivion. He starts walking through streets that once seemed full of promises. Where he thought he found a bright future, today he finds evasive glances. If before he was surrounded by expectation, now indifference reigns. No one recognizes his tired face, no one suspects the story he carries on his shoulders. Among the crowd, he is just another man with an uncertain step. Upon reaching a corner, he looks up at a distant skyscraper. The Smith Company Tower stands out against the sky, imposing and cynical. He feels nauseous remembering himself in their halls, believing their words, abandoning what he was for a mirage. He clenches his fists and lowers his gaze. That world is alien to him. He continues, now lighter, without absurd expectations. He arrives at a bus station where he buys a ticket to Puerto Ancla, the town where he was born. He boards a modest vehicle, dusty windows, worn upholstery seats. No one pays attention to him, but that no longer matters. He sits by the window, hugging the bag to his chest. He feels the beating of his own heart. a dull drum marking the rhythm of his new life. The engine purrs as it starts. The city fades behind, shrinking with distance. Gabriel watches the changing landscape. Concrete gives way to simpler roads, scattered trees, and wider horizons. He thinks of Cecilia and her warm voice, the salty breeze of Puerto Ancla, the sand beneath his feet. Maybe there, in the humility of the place where he grew up, he can find the strength to start over. This time without fantasies, without blind naivety, but with the determination of someone who knows what it means to lose everything. Gabriel, with a face marked by pain, shows a silent determination not to repeat the mistakes, not to trust in well-carved masks. Clinging to that purpose, he ventures into the unknown, seeking refuge in the sea, in the land, in his mother's memory, and in the simplicity of a second chance. The bus stops with a metallic grunt at the entrance of Puerto Ancla. The sea breeze arrives gently, but does not bring the fresh and invigorating smell Gabriel remembered from his childhood. Now, in the air floats a sour melancholy, a mix between salt spray, wood smoke, and an indefinite trace of something that could be despair. The sun, unlike in the city, here does not dazzle or burn. It is paler, as if a grey film covers it, dimming its light. Gabriel disembarks with his worn suitcase, holding it with a tired hand. He brings little, just clothes, his mother's old amulet, and some sketches that survived his time in prison. His face, thinner and more serious, contemplates the panorama with a mix of nostalgia and pain. Before, in his memories, Puerto Ancla was a picturesque and vibrant town, the buzz of daily activity, fish vendors shouting prices, children laughing as they run between moored boats, farmers' voices offering fresh fruit in the small market. But today, the streets look silent. Some houses have ajar doors without the hustle and bustle of before. The boats at the dock sway, but the nets look tattered, and the scarcity of fish is a murmur heard in the disheartened conversations of the few remaining fishermen. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerges from a corner. Diana, his sister. Upon seeing him, she stops with tense arms, unsure whether to approach or wait for him to take the first step. When they finally lock eyes, the tension dissolves. Diana runs to him and hugs him. It is a long, strong embrace, a bond attempting to mend the lost time. Gabriel feels his sister's body tremble, notices how her breath stirs with a cry she cannot fully release. "So many things have happened, Gabriel," she whispers, her voice on the verge of sobbing. He cannot manage to respond. His words choke in his throat. Shame, grief, and affection intertwine in a difficult knot to untie. Without letting go of her arm, Diana guides him through the dusty streets to the old family house. Gabriel vividly remembers every corner of that home. The white facade his mother Cecilia painted every 2 years, the pots with yellow flowers in the window, the small but generous garden where aromatic herbs and vegetables grew. Now, as he turns a corner, he comes face to face with a desolate image. The house looks blackened, the walls marked with soot, the roof patched with ill-fitting sheets. Diana explains in a low voice, "There was a fire some time ago. The insurance never paid what was promised, and with the scarce income, they couldn't properly restore it. They have patched it up as best they could, but the house is practically uninhabitable." Gabriel feels a cold weight in his chest. The absence of his mother beats like a wound that does not close. Cecilia is no longer here, and the house, which was a reflection of her love and effort, is now a shadow of what it was. Without saying a word, Gabriel enters the yard, where once the sun illuminated his mother's laughter and the plants she lovingly tended. The garden is dry, choked by weeds and neglect. In a corner, he finds a pair of rusty tools, perhaps the ones Cecilia used to turn the soil. Diana stays a few steps away, respecting her brother's silence. "Many have left, Gabriel," Diana comments softly, looking around. "Fishing has declined. The sea no longer offers what it used to. There were promises of investors, industrial projects. but nothing concrete. Some neighbors heard rumors about your problem in the city. Some pity you, others don't know what to think. They are afraid, distrustful. This place is no longer what you remembered. Gabriel nods his head. He walks a few steps, feeling the gaze of some neighbors behind the curtains. He recognizes a few, but they quickly turn inward. Others, braver, watch him with curiosity, trying to read his face to see if he is the same young man who left full of dreams, or a stranger bearing the dark trail of prison. Guilt, shame, the feeling of having failed, not only himself but his family, overwhelms him. Now he realizes that his starting point upon returning is nothingness. He has no capital, no prestige, no support from former allies. He only possesses his will and his mother's memory. Diana lets out a sigh, as if she wanted to say something more, but holds back. She leads him into the house, to a partially darkened room. Tarps have been placed to cover gaps. Humidity seeps in, leaving a smell of rotten wood and ash. This is the scenario Gabriel inherits: ruins, distrust, poverty. And yet, he does not feel absolute hopelessness. He knows that after falling into the abyss, all that remains is to climb back into the light. Being here, in his hometown, means clinging to his roots and trying to make something new flourish, no matter how small. Later, after leaving the suitcase in a corner, Gabriel goes for a walk around the village. He recognizes the pier with its loose boards, the small lantern that once guided fishermen in the early morning. The sea breeze carries an almost imperceptible whisper, a call of distant seagulls. The simplicity of the place contrasts with the deceptive opulence of the city. Here, if you fall, there are no masks to blame. Every action and decision leave a mark in the sand, visible to all. Upon returning to Diana, he doesn't deliver grand speeches. His silence is eloquent. He has understood that he must start from scratch, like when he planted seeds in the garden with his mother, hoping they would germinate in due time. Now the seeds are new, regret for what he has lived through, learning from the betrayal he suffered, the firm desire not to trust anyone blindly again. He has the opportunity to rebuild himself, without lies, without embellishments, only with effort and dignity. The sun barely peeks through low clouds when Gabriel, kneeling on the earthy ground, helps Diana reorganize the clutter in the house, scarred by fire and neglect. They sort objects into what is still usable, what needs repair, and what is beyond remedy. The humidity from the sea breeze penetrates the cracks of the facade, and the distant creak of some boards underfoot blends with the external silence of the village. Only a rooster's crow, sporadic footsteps on the sand, and sometimes the hum of an engine at the pier can be heard. In these tasks, they find themselves when a small, determined figure crosses the broken threshold. Elizabeth, the village biologist, enters with muddy boots, sturdy pants, and rolled-up sleeves. Her hair is tied in a tight bun, and her tired gaze is filled with an almost tangible determination. The wet earth splashing her boots and the stern expression on her face speak of a daily struggle, as silent as it is constant, against the environmental devastation threatening Puerto Ancla. "You must be Gabriel," she asks bluntly, crossing her arms over her chest. Diana stands up, wipes her hands on her apron, and explains to her brother who Elizabeth is. This woman has dedicated years to studying the nearby wetlands and mangroves, ecosystems that once ensured the balance of the coast, filtering water, protecting the shoreline against erosion, providing nutrients to fish schools, thus supporting the village's artisanal fishing. Now, these natural systems are retreating day by day. Destructive fishing practices, illegal logging, and the interests of unscrupulous businessmen have been eroding the foundation that sustained life in Puerto Ancla. "Diana told me you have training in environmental engineering," says Elizabeth, her tone direct, without seeking praise or beating around the bush. "I've reviewed the nearby mangroves, and the situation is serious. The municipality does nothing or turns a blind eye. The local police are either corrupt or too busy to handle complaints, and the owners of nearby estates only think about selling wood or expanding their land regardless of the damage. Gabriel listens with the attention of someone who recognizes the music of a known language. He remembers his early professional dreams when he still believed in the goodness of large companies and in the promises of sustainable projects. Now, back in his land, the environmental cause presents itself to him without embellishments, without elegant rhetoric, without tailored suits. Here, there are no lobbies or misleading advertisements. Here, the environment suffers in silence, and only the determination of people like Elizabeth can make a difference. "Do you want me to help monitor the wetlands?" asks Gabriel, feeling a slight pang in his chest, a mix of fear and hope. "Something like that," replies the biologist. "I need someone with knowledge, who understands the importance of these ecosystems and can document the aggressions. Someone who can report what's happening and maintain a constant presence. You'd be a park ranger, so to speak. The job isn't easy. Low pay, long walks, mosquitoes, heat, threats. But every effort counts." Diana looks at her brother. She says nothing, but her gaze conveys silent support. They both know that Gabriel can no longer trust grand glass palaces or pretty words. What Elizabeth offers is real, tangible, and without double intentions. Taking care of the mangroves won't make him rich, but at least he can put his vocation and knowledge into practice in a way that this land urgently needs. Gabriel nods, feeling a slight tremble in his hand. "I accept," he says, almost in a whisper. The word lingers in the dusty air of the semi-ruined house, somehow fitting with the village's silence. A promise of action and redemption. He remembers what he once promised his mother, to improve things. Maybe it won't be by buying a big house or obtaining important positions, but here, protecting the wetlands, he can honor her in a purer way. Later, Elizabeth leads him to the area where he will live and work. A simple wooden cabin, raised on stilts, hides among twisted roots, wetlands, and a green network embracing the coast. The ground is uneven and damp, fallen leaves crunch under his boots, and in the distance, invisible birds can be heard. Brackish water seeps through invisible channels, sustaining life. Here, the landscape doesn't need luxurious decorations. The song of the birds, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, the distant croak of some amphibians, all compose a melody that Gabriel hasn't heard since his childhood. The cabin is basic, a simple bed, an improvised table with old planks, a couple of empty shelves. In one corner there's a kerosene lamp, in the other, a basic first aid kit. Elizabeth points out the surroundings, explains the most delicate areas, the escape routes to avoid getting lost. She tells him about poaching fishermen who use homemade explosives, clandestine loggers who cut down trees at night. Gabriel's task will be to report them, document, give a warning to the appropriate authorities, at least until public pressure, if it comes, forces the authorities to act. Gabriel takes a deep breath. The air is fresh despite the humidity. This humble park ranger post is, ironically, the most honorable point he has reached in years. Far from the glitter of the city, far from lies, here he can build something authentic. He touches the amulet hanging around his neck, remembering Cecilia's calloused hands. He imagines his mother approving of what he is doing now. Gabriel feels renewed, with a clear objective: to defend the life that springs from the mangrove roots, protect the birds, the fish, the invisible balance that sustains the village, even if the village itself doesn't fully understand it. As Elizabeth leaves to continue her assessments, Gabriel stays on the cabin's porch, contemplating the wetlands stretching before his eyes. A vulnerable yet resilient landscape. He feels a strange tranquility, as if he is finally in the right place, doing the right thing, without lies or disguises. With the sea breeze caressing his face, he understands that here, amidst fragile nature, he can begin his redemption. The day is humid and hot, with a whitish sky allowing a diffuse light to filter over the wetlands. Gabriel, wearing rubber boots and an old cap, ventures into the green maze formed by the mangroves, the small channels of brackish water, and the tangled aerial roots like fingers asking for help. He carries a wrinkled notebook, an old phone that barely works for calls and text messages, and above all, his determination. There are no sophisticated cameras, drones, or state-of-the-art equipment here. Only him, his firm will, and the heightened attention born of distrust. Throughout the day, he notes the signs he finds. An illegal net among submerged roots, designed to catch fish indiscriminately. A trail of motorcycles that shouldn't enter the protected area, marking the land with their rubber tracks. Some metal bird traps, set with calculated cruelty. Each discovery pains his chest, a reminder that human greed is willing to raise the last natural barrier, protecting Puerto Ancla from total decay. Gabriel informs Elizabeth of everything he finds. He sends brief messages. Bird trap in northern wetland, third mangrove to the right, or illegal nets in southern lagoon. She forwards data and photos to the city hall, hoping some authority will react. But in return, they only receive silence, vague excuses. "We are looking into it. The situation is complex. We lack resources." The responses are always condescending and sterile. Gabriel understands that someone powerful prefers to maintain the status quo. Diana told him about Kyle, a local businessman who seems to have a foot in every dirty business: clandestine wood sales, destructive fishing, bribing officials, and above all, the interest in turning protected areas into tourist complexes. And behind the curtain, Elliot Smith resonates as a name associated with Kyle, a ghostly presence from the past that Gabriel knows all too well. Hearing Elliot's name, a veiled whisper, brings to his mind old broken promises and his own futile sacrifice. Now, understanding that Kyle, Elliot's ally or partner, is behind these practices, confirms that corruption weaves invisible threads between the city and the village, between luxury and mud. Gabriel realizes he has become a nuisance, a man willing to denounce, to prevent things from staying the same. That means risk. It means they could threaten him to silence him. One afternoon, with shoulders tense and sweat sticking his shirt to his back, he hears a soft, sharp whimper amidst the foliage. It's a lament that could go unnoticed among the chorus of crickets and the splashing of birds, but Gabriel sharpens his ear. His steps, slow and cautious, lead him to a bend in the terrain where dark mud and twisted roots form a natural trap. There, he discovers the source of the crying. A mixed-breed dog, short-haired and ash-colored, trapped by her legs in a rigid plastic net. The illegal trap, meant for some wild animal, does not distinguish an innocent victim. The poor creature trembles, her breathing rapid, ribs marked by thinness. Upon seeing Gabriel, her eyes shine with immense fear, but also with fragile hope. "Calm down," he whispers, kneeling carefully. With his knife, he slowly cuts the plastic, trying not to hurt her further. The dog whines, flares her ears, doesn't try to bite him. He feels that this human is not coming to harm her. When her legs are free, Gabriel gently pets her. His fingers feel the animal's trembling, the warm skin beneath the grime. She licks his hand with a rough, clumsy tongue, a gesture that, despite everything, shows gratitude. Gabriel sighs with relief. He carries the dog in his arms through muddy paths and vegetation, avoiding sinking into deep puddles. Today, his inspection journey not only had tragic findings, but also a life saved. Back in his cabin, he lays the dog on an old towel. With the basic first aid kit Elizabeth left him, he cleans the wounds, applies disinfectant, and bandages her legs with strips of cloth. The dog, exhausted, doesn't complain. She only watches him with her sad, gentle eyes, this stranger who has given her a breath of life back. Gabriel names her Luna. The name comes to him without thinking, perhaps because of the way the dim evening light, now that the sun is setting, gives her coat a silvery sheen. Or maybe because, like the moon, Luna has lived in the shadows, without anyone noticing her pain until now. As night falls, Gabriel lights the lamp. The cabin fills with a warm light that contrasts with the humidity outside. Outside, crickets can be heard, the distant murmur of the sea and the sound of wind through the branches. Inside, Luna sleeps at the foot of the bed, her breathing now peaceful. Gabriel sits at the table and reviews his notes. Each trap, each net, each motorcycle trail are pieces of a sinister puzzle. He knows Kyle won't sit idly by. If this improvised park ranger insists on denouncing, on not turning a blind eye sooner or later, they will try to silence him. But, for the first time in a long time, Gabriel feels he is not completely alone. Luna, the mangrove breeze, Elizabeth's sincerity, the silent resistance of the wetlands. All of this is a map of strength, a network of invisible allies that reminds him that it's worth fighting for. Not for revenge, not for ambition, but for the simple truth that this place is sacred in its fragility. As he watches the mixed-breed dog curled up, he feels a strange serenity. Before in the city, he had borrowed luxuries, false praise, and hollow promises. Now, he has a precarious cabin, a modest job, an injured dog, and a moral duty. And yet, he feels more whole, more honest with himself. That night, under the distant song of nocturnal birds and the murmur of the sea, Gabriel understands that fear will not paralyze him. The consequences will come, no doubt, but he will no longer retreat. Kyle and his accomplices can threaten him. He will continue observing, noting, denouncing. And with Luna by his side, with the sigh of nature that resists, he finds the courage to wait for the next day, determined to protect what matters. The night in the coastal forest is a cloak of shadows and whispers. Gabriel moves forward with cautious steps, the flashlight in one hand, the other brushing against the low-hanging branches. Luna, now recovered from her wounds, trots beside him, twitching her ears at every distant noise. The air is thick with humidity, and the brackish smell of the sea mixes with the density of the wetland. A moment ago, Gabriel was checking traps and hidden nets, trying to anticipate Kyle and his men's movements. Now the darkness forces him to sharpen his senses, the slight snap of a branch, the distant flutter of a nocturnal bird, the drip of water between roots. Suddenly, a different sound breaks the routine order of the night, a soft cry, almost a diffuse sob. Gabriel stops abruptly, raises the flashlight, and Luna turns her head, ears perked. It's not a scared animal nor the yowl of a wild cat. It's a human voice, very small, trembling from cold and abandonment. A baby. Although the idea seems absurd in this setting, the cry is unmistakable. Gabriel moves forward, guided by the sound, navigating through vines and roots, dodging low branches, until he reaches a small clearing among the trees. There, wrapped in dirty and somewhat foul-smelling blankets, a newborn baby cries with a weak, broken whimper. Gabriel's heart jumps as if it had hit a wall. He crouches carefully, storing the flashlight in his pocket, and gently cradles the child. The creature is tiny, pale-skinned, cheeks damp with tears. Luna approaches, sniffs respectfully, whining softly. It seems to understand the fragility of this life so unexpectedly arisen in the heart of the forest. Calm down, Gabriel whispers, wrapping the baby with his jacket. He feels the tremor of the little limbs, the weakness of the cry that, under human warmth, diminishes slightly. There's no time to lose. A newborn baby, abandoned to the elements, won't survive the night without help. Without hesitation, Gabriel embarks on a clumsy race back to the village. The flashlight illuminates the path in bursts. Luna runs beside him. The weight of the baby is minimal, almost like a feather, but the responsibility Gabriel feels on his shoulders is immense. It seems unreal, as if life is testing him again. This time it's not just about trees or fish, but about an absolutely defenseless human being. Upon reaching the inhabited area, the yellow lights of the street lamps and the few little lamps in the sleeping houses seem like thousands of guides in the darkness. Gabriel goes straight to the small local clinic, a modest building with whitewashed walls and frosted glass windows. The door is not locked, and inside, in a hallway lit by a couple of fluorescent tubes, Lucy, the paramedic, greets him with astonished eyes. She, a widow known for her tireless dedication to the sick, did not expect such an emergency at this hour. "My God! What?" she exclaims upon seeing Gabriel with the baby wrapped in his jacket. Without wasting a second, she leads him to a small room with a stretcher and a couple of shelves with medical instruments. The place smells of antiseptic and dried herbs. Andrea, Lucy's 10-year-old daughter with dark braids, watches from the door with wide eyes. The silence that reigned in the night is broken by the hustle of hands, utensils, jars, and gauze. Lucy examines the baby carefully. She weighs him, checks his temperature, observes his reflexes. In a calm and firm voice, she says, "It's a little boy, only a few weeks old. He's dehydrated, trembling. We need to feed him with a bottle. Luckily, his vital signs are relatively stable." Gabriel, leaning against the wall, feels a cold sweat running down his neck. He wonders, who abandoned him? Why here, so far from everything? Indignation, surprise, and tenderness mix in his chest. Andrea approaches without anyone stopping her, with a look of curiosity and compassion. The baby, feeling the warmth of the clean blankets Lucy brings, stops crying desperately and only whimpers, like a sigh asking for comfort. Lucy turns to Gabriel and, without hiding her admiration, says, "You did well to bring him immediately. You've saved this child's life." He nods, still without words, his throat dry. He feels the gratitude in the woman's voice and something more, the mutual understanding between those who see human fragility and the need to care for it. Gabriel then recalls his original purpose upon returning to the village, to protect nature. Now this creature is also a vulnerable being, a living environment that requires defense, warmth, and nourishment. "Do you know his name?" Andrea asks with the innocence of her age, gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. "I don't. I found him like this," Gabriel replies in a hushed voice. "We could call him Elias," Lucy suggests with a slight smile, perhaps remembering a grandfather from the village or simply choosing a name that sounds like hope. Gabriel has no objections. Elias, a name that sounds like light in the middle of the night. Luna, sitting by the door, watches the scene with calm eyes. The dog, like Gabriel, was rescued from pain. Now she is a silent witness to another rescue, that of a nameless baby who has just received one, and with him, a new opportunity to live. As Lucy takes care of feeding him warm milk and gently caressing his forehead to soothe him, Gabriel breathes slowly. He feels a tenderness blossoming inside him that he thought was extinguished by past betrayals. Amid so many wounds, lies, and struggles, this child, Elias, is proof that innocence still exists in the world, and that Gabriel can serve as a shield against human miseries. The look Gabriel exchanges with Lucy, full of understanding silence, confirms that he is not alone in this task. Just as he protects the mangroves, the fauna, the birds, now his protection extends to an abandoned child. In some way, the fight for balance, for dignified life, encompasses more than nature. It includes every defenseless being that the world cruelly discards. That night, Elias's cry transforms into a sleepy whisper, wrapped in clean blankets and the improvised care of those who decided not to ignore his cry. Gabriel retires, leaving Elias in Lucy's hands. As he steps into the twilight, Luna approaches him, wagging her tail. He pets her and feels the morning chill on his face. But this time, he carries a flame in his chest, the certainty that he can make a difference, no matter how small, in the fate of the most fragile beings. The night outside has grown thick. A chorus of insects sings their litany in the darkness, accompanied by the distant murmur of the sea and the whisper of the wind through the bushes. Inside the small health center, the atmosphere is different. A haven of forced stillness, barely illuminated by a dim lamp hanging over a peeling wall. Shadows draw soft contours in the narrow hallway, where Gabriel and Lucy sit in worn wooden chairs, facing each other, with a cup of hot tea between their hands. Andrea, Lucy's daughter, sleeps in a corner, her head resting against the whitewashed wall. Her arms hang loosely by her sides, and from time to time she emits a shaky sigh. Beyond, in the office that serves as both the emergency room and the makeshift maternity ward, Elias, the found baby, sleeps in a hastily made crib. A clean drawer, some soft blankets, and the distant lull of adult voices trying not to wake anyone. Gabriel sips his tea slowly. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the accumulated tension of the past hours. Almost without realizing it, he casts a glance toward the room where the child rests, then looks back at Lucy. The paramedic, with her tired but firm face, invites him to talk. There's no need to pressure him. The warmth of the tea, the calm presence of this woman, and the shared dimness relax Gabriel's defenses. "I suppose you're wondering what a stranger is doing wandering the forest at this hour," he begins softly. At first, his words sound tense, as if he's afraid of being judged. But Lucy doesn't press. She simply nods silently, with a serene gaze. Gabriel, piece by piece, reconstructs his story. He reveals the basics: that he was in prison for a crime he didn't actually commit, that he was a victim of a cruel betrayal, that the woman he loved and his in-laws abandoned him to his fate, that his mother, Cecilia, died without him being able to say goodbye, and that when he got out of prison, he had nothing in the world. He returned to Puerto Ancla because it was the only place he could call home, even if it was just a wounded memory. He confesses that he is now a park ranger and that he tries to protect, with limited means, the fragile nature that still remains. He talks about the mangrove, the traps that take the forest's life, the dog Luna that he rescued. Each word dissolves into the air with a hint of bitterness and acceptance. He seems like a man tired of lies, preferring naked truth without adornments. Lucy listens, sometimes frowning in indignation, sometimes with sadness reflected in her pupils. Her response is not empty pity. When Gabriel pauses and lowers his gaze, Lucy begins to tell her own story, the loss of her husband, who went out fishing one night while a storm was brewing on the horizon. He never returned. The fishermen say that the sea doesn't always return those it takes. She had to become strong overnight, raise Andrea alone, and learn to deal with fear, precariousness, and the indifference of a village that, after the initial compassion, returned to its routine. Lucy found a reason to keep going in her work as a paramedic, to heal wounds, alleviate pains, give a glimpse of hope to the sick and injured who come to her humble health center. Lucy's voice is soft, modulated, and in the dimness, it seems to come from an intimate space she guards jealously. Her words resonate without theatrics. Thus, Gabriel's tragedy meets Lucy's tragedy. Two pains facing each other, without the need to hide. He is no longer the stranger who appeared with an abandoned child in his arms. She is no longer just the kind paramedic. They are two damaged beings, seeking a way to rebuild their worlds from the ruins. Andrea shifts in her chair, emits a sigh, but doesn't wake up. Gabriel and Lucy lower their voices, as if sharing secrets in a sacred temple. Outside, the night continues with its chorus of crickets, but inside, time seems to stand still. The warmth of the tea fades, but human warmth ignites. Shared compassion, mutual respect. They don't need to pretend or embellish their words. They understand each other because both have been on the edge of the abyss. "Thank you for trusting me," Lucy says softly, after a silence that follows the confessions. "Thank you for listening and not judging me," Gabriel responds. Their gazes meet in the midst of the dimness. There is a kind of understanding in that eye contact. Neither of them desires pity, but rather recognition, the certainty of not being alone in their solitude. They think of Elias, the rescued baby. His presence is a miniature miracle, a child brought to life with nothing and no one at the mercy of the night. Now, by chance, by destiny, or by a mysterious alignment of events, he is safe. Gabriel wonders if, just as he protects the ecosystem, he can also protect this creature. Lucy, for her part, considers whether she can offer him more than medical care, perhaps a bond, a familial warmth he never knew. The dim lamp casts shadows on the walls, creating a mosaic of penumbras. Every time one of them moves an arm, the contours of their silhouettes transform into a play of light and darkness. So are their lives, games of chiaroscuro, of bright moments and dark phases. But in this instant, in the fragile stillness of the hallway, they feel an internal breeze soothe them. There are no grand promises or declarations, only the certainty of having found a safe space to share the truth. Outside, the distant singing of the wind among the trees seems to whisper something. Perhaps the confirmation that, amid chaos, humanity can still engender understanding and sweetness. Lucy and Gabriel continue talking, first about their pasts, then about simpler matters. The health status of some village patients, the need to improve the mangrove conditions, the uncertain future of Puerto Ancla. Their voices become softer, almost a murmur that rocks the night. When fatigue finally threatens to close their eyelids, they both rise in silence, careful not to wake Andrei or Elias. Before parting, they exchange one last look. They don't need to say that they understand each other. The complicity flows effortlessly. Gabriel steps into the humid air, with Luna following him silently. Lucy remains, guarding Andrei and Elias's sleep, with a slightly lighter mind. In the dimness of the hallway, a faint light continues to shine. At that moment, Gabriel and Lucy have discovered a kind of clarity that does not depend on lamps or candles, but on the honesty between two human beings who have allowed themselves to trust. And as the night progresses, that internal clarity, that spark of mutual understanding, is planted in their hearts. The sun beats down with its midday heat on Puerto Ancla. The clinic, with its whitewashed walls and small courtyard, is an oasis of relative calm. Gabriel and Lucy, seated on wicker chairs under a timid shade, converse in low voices. Inside, Andrei entertains Elias with improvised rattles, and the intermittent sound of the babbling baby mixes with the rustling of dry leaves dragged by the wind. Several days have passed since Gabriel found him in the forest, and the uncertainty about his future becomes increasingly pressing. "I've been reading some of the local laws," murmurs Lucy, her gaze fixed on the uneven tile floor. "Adoption isn't simple, but it's possible. We would have to demonstrate stability, a safe environment." Gabriel nods slowly. He holds in his mind the image of Elias, the fragile form of his small body, his occasional laughter, and his eyes that seem not to judge the world that abandoned him. The idea of raising him, of giving him a dignified home, fills him with a warmth he hasn't felt in a long time. It's more than a responsibility. It's a way to redeem himself and to build something authentically good. Lucy feels the same. After losing her husband, raising Andrei strengthened her, and now the protective instinct she feels for Elias blossoms with softness and firmness. Without warning, the atmosphere changes. The courtyard door opens with a rough squeak, and stumbling in on worn-out sandals, Jessica bursts in. Her clothes are dirty, her eyes bloodshot with anger and exhaustion, and a sour smell of alcohol and sweat fills the air. Lucy's face hardens instantly. Gabriel stands up, not raising his voice, but tense like a bow about to shoot. "Where is my son?" Jessica mumbles, her tongue clumsy. There is mockery, disdain, and a hint of madness in her gaze. Lucy crosses her arms. "Your son? The same one you left lying in the forest?" Her tone is sharp, not hiding her indignation. Jessica makes a violent gesture with her hand. Shut up. Now that everyone is talking about the kid, I know he's worth something. I want money. Her words resonate with a sordid echo. To her, Elias is nothing more than a pawn, a bargaining chip. If you don't give me money, I'll make a scene. I'll say you stole him, that you kidnapped him. Her eyes gleam with the reflection of a premeditated threat. The silence that follows is chilling despite the heat. Gabriel feels his blood boil. He clenches his fists, trying not to lose his composure. That woman dares to blackmail them after having abandoned her son to the elements. He tries to keep his voice in check. We're not going to pay a single cent, Jessica. If you want to make a scene, go ahead. But be sure that we have witnesses and that everyone knows what you did. The response doesn't satisfy the intruder, who makes a mocking grimace. Lucy, with clenched teeth, adds, "You're not going to scare us. The child is safe, and you didn't give him a name or care. Now you come out with demands. What kind of mother are you?" The word mother comes out with a sharpness that cuts the air. Jessica shifts, not completely backing down. On the street, a couple of neighbors begin to peek out from behind slightly open doors. The news spreads faster than the wind in such a small town. Some already know that Gabriel and Lucy found the baby and are taking care of him. Others have heard the rumor that Jessica might be the one who abandoned him. Now they witness this confrontation from a distance. Which side to take? Many hesitate. Poverty and desperation are common here. Some understand Jessica's misfortunes, others condemn her mercilessly. In Gabriel's mind, the image of the past, people who didn't hesitate to abandon him when he needed them, the city that turned its back on him, Helena, who never defended him. Now, before him, another person tries to profit from the innocence of a child. He won't allow it. If he was weak before, prey to deceit, now he won't be intimidated. Jessica spits on the ground, frowns, and seeing that her threat has no effect, staggers away. In her farewell, she throws one last warning. "This isn't over. Either you pay, or I'll shout it in the plaza." Gabriel swallows hard. Lucy releases a tired sigh. The tension remains like an invisible dagger lodged between their ribs. For a moment, only the distant singing of a cicada is heard. Andrea, from inside, peeks her head out with Elias in her arms. The baby, oblivious to everything, babbles a soft sound and laughs with a face lit by innocence. It's as if the contrast with the sordidness of the threats fills the courtyard with light. A few minutes later, Gabriel and Lucy look into each other's eyes. They don't need many words to understand what they feel. Finding Elias gave them a purpose. They have found in that small, defenseless being a reason to carry on, something noble to fight for. The idea of adopting him, of giving him a stable home, now gains more strength. It's not just about protecting him from the elements, but from the greed and meanness of the world. If they manage to give him a dignified future, they will have proven that goodness can sprout amid misery. The town murmurs. Some neighbors believe that Gabriel and Lucy should pay Jessica, solve the conflict with money, keep the peace. That way, no one gets into trouble, they whisper. Others, perhaps more idealistic or simply decent, defend the noble act of having saved the child's life. In this muffled debate, Gabriel understands that, after having lost so much in his life, defending Elias gives him a profound sense. And Lucy, who has rebuilt her own home after her husband's death, feels inside that Elias's arrival is not a coincidence. It's a second chance to believe that there is a future worth it. As the sun moves towards the afternoon, Gabriel helps Lucy close the clinic's windows. Andrea returns inside with Elias, placing him in his improvised crib. The noisy voices of the town are left behind. In their hearts, Gabriel and Lucy know that the fight is just beginning. But now, they are not alone. They have Elias, who, by his mere existence, reminds them that life goes on, that love can be nurtured even amid hostility, and that they must not give in to blackmail or human baseness. Thus, with the image of Elias peacefully asleep, they decide that silence is not an option. They will defend their principles, their budding home, their emerging family, against anyone who tries to tarnish them with vileness. And in that silent pact, the afternoon in Puerto Ancla acquires a new intensity, made of resilience and hope. The atmosphere in Puerto Ancla seems charged with an invisible dust that irritates everyone's spirits. There is a tension in the air, a kind of static that makes glances cross with distrust. The town's dusty streets, once the scene of quiet conversations and modest bartering, have filled with uncomfortable silences and half-whispered gossip. It's not a place unfamiliar with hardships, but now those hardships have become harsher. The sea no longer provides enough fish, the land is exhausted, and the mangrove is withering under the pressure of illegal logging. Diana, Gabriel's sister, struggles each day at the village school. It's a precarious building with old benches and a chalkboard that humidity is wearing down. Many children arrive without breakfast. Their empty stomachs no longer rumble. They have become accustomed to the emptiness of hunger. These are kids who gaze with serious eyes at the lessons Diana imparts, trying to ignite in them a hope for the future. But poverty runs deep. The youth grow up without prospects, looking around and seeing only misery, corruption, and abandonment. Some dream of leaving, others of settling in the shadow of some local powerful figure. In this environment, Ivan, Diana's boyfriend, feels increasingly tempted. With no opportunities or stable employment, frustrated by broken promises, he starts listening to Kyle's thugs. They pay to watch over illegal logging, to escort trucks with dubious goods, to turn a blind eye to smuggling. Ivan isn't bad, but desperation drives him. He wants to progress, to buy a decent roof over his head, or at least have money to eat without shortages. The call of corruption is sweet and deceitful, promises of easy money in exchange for silence and blind loyalty. One afternoon, when the sun sets behind grey clouds, Diana arrives at the cabin where Gabriel lives near the wetlands. She comes with red eyes, a gaunt face. Gabriel leaves Luna outside and sits beside her on the wooden porch. His sister confesses through sobs that Ivan is about to succumb to Kyle's temptations. She fears losing him, not only as a partner, but as an upright man. He could become just another one of the businessman's informal soldiers, a pawn in the machinery that destroys the natural environment and the village's dignity. Gabriel, upon hearing her, feels anger thumping in his temples. Impotence and pain mute him for a moment. He hugs Diana, letting her cry on his shoulder. Then, with a hoarse voice, he promises to talk to Ivan, to try to make him understand the cost of selling out to Kyle. But Gabriel also knows that his own situation is delicate. His work as a park ranger annoys the businessman. In recent weeks, he has received threatening notes, strange murmurs in the market, fixed stares that don't look away. People who used to greet him now stay silent when they see him. No one has laid a hand on him, but the pressure is felt. Kyle doesn't need to use force immediately. He knows that fear can be a silent weapon. The community fractures along invisible lines. Some respect Gabriel for his honesty. They know that by protecting the mangrove, they are protecting the very foundation of life in Puerto Ancla. Others blame him for making too much noise, attracting the attention of the police or the press, things that could bring them greater problems. Some feel ashamed of the corruption, but shrug their shoulders. That's just how things are, they say. Skepticism and fatigue taint the collective character of the village. Meanwhile, Lucy does her best to keep Elias safe in the small clinic. There are no luxuries, just an improvised crib and some toys that Andrei lends to the baby. Lucy works attending to minor wounds, administering vaccines, and taking care of births when the village's pregnant women cannot afford a hospital far away. In this precarious environment, Elias becomes a point of light, an innocent baby, unaware of disputes and greed, who demands only milk, warmth, and tenderness with his cries. Every time Lucy and Gabriel look at him, the idea of adopting him strengthens further. Love grows with the constancy of the routine. Every bottle, every lullaby, every toothless smile of the baby is a stronger bond. However, the laws and the family situation do not make things easy. Gabriel, ex-convict and with unstable work, can he convince the authorities that he is a good candidate to raise Elias? Lucy, a widow with a daughter, will she manage to navigate the bureaucratic hurdles to add a new child? And the town, with its murmurs, will it not impose moral obstacles, gossip and pressure? It is amid this tension that the nights become longer. Gabriel wonders if what he does as a park ranger is of any use, or if it only exposes him to fall again under the claws of injustice. He thinks of his past, Helena's betrayal, the prison, his mother's death. Now he feels that if he takes a step back, he will lose not only his honor, but also the opportunity to build something good alongside Lucy. On the other hand, moving forward means facing growing threats. The wetland landscape, with its resilient mangroves, becomes a metaphor for the resistance Gabriel needs. Those intertwined roots fight against erosion and currents, just as he must fight against corruption and hopelessness. The dawn, tinting the horizon with pale orange, reminds him every day that nothing is permanent and that perseverance can bear fruit. The precarious school, the modest clinic, the pier with broken nets, the abandoned garden of the old family house, all are settings of a silent battle. Gabriel, Lucy, Diana, Andrei, Elias, and even Luna participate in this intimate drama, while Kyle and his thugs lurk in the shadows, and the town debates between resignation and courage. In this heavy climate, the will to adopt Elias becomes a lamp in the midst of the gloom. Achieving it, turning the abandoned child into a loved son, would be a moral victory. It would demonstrate that, despite corruption, fear, and poverty, humanity and love can make their way. And that hope, as fragile as a bird's song before dawn, is what drives Gabriel and Lucy to move forward, not to give in to pressures, and to believe that one day the sun will shine cleaner over Puerto Ancla. The afternoon falls over Puerto Ancla with a soft sigh, tinting the sky with pale oranges and soft pinks. Lucy's modest home seems like an island of peace amidst the village's daily turbulences. The whitewashed walls, the simple wooden door, the distant buzzing of insects creating a sound backdrop in the silence. Inside, the warm light of scattered lamps and candles invites tranquility. The aroma of freshly brewed tea leaves mixes with the faint perfume of some herb that Lucy keeps in a glass jar. Gabriel enters cautiously, and Lucy greets him in the room that serves as the dining room. Andrei, exhausted after a day of studying and helping her mother, sleeps in her room. Elias, curled up in an improvised but warm crib, breathes slowly in the adjacent room. The sound of his tiny breathing envelops the atmosphere with quiet tenderness. There are no luxuries here, no expensive furniture, no exotic delicacies, but there is a sense of home that Gabriel hasn't experienced since he was very young. They sit at the table, 2 cups, a tray with bread and fresh cheese, some candles casting soft shadows on the worn wood. Gabriel swallows nervously. For days his thoughts have been circling, searching for the right way and moment to propose what his heart has been hiding. The candlelight dances over his serene but tense features, and Lucy, unaware of what he is about to say, feels a tingle of anticipation. "Lucy," Gabriel begins softly, almost a whisper, to avoid waking the children. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about Elias, about what we want to do." His hands rest on the table, nervous, and his eyes search hers without evasion. Adopting Elias won't be easy. There are procedures, evaluations, and the law. The law looks more favorably on a stable family. Lucy looks up. Her eyebrows arch with slight surprise. He pauses, takes a breath, and continues. "I know it sounds rushed, perhaps pragmatic, but it's also sincere. I've come to feel not only affection for Elias, but for you, for Andrea, for this dynamic we have. I admire your strength, Lucy, and your ability to fight adversity. I'm amazed by the tenderness with which you treat everyone. Patience, neighbors, this baby who appeared without warning. And I admire the way you've built a dignified life despite the losses. The last word, losses, floats for a moment in the air. They both know what he means. Lucy, a widow, never imagined rebuilding her life with someone else. Gabriel, betrayed and humiliated, didn't believe he could trust again. But there they are, breathing the same nocturnal breeze, united by the protection of a defenseless child. What I mean, Gabriel continues with a firm tone but an accelerated heart, is that, would you marry me? I know it's not the traditional way, there were no courtships or elaborate rings, but it's a real commitment. Adoption would be easier if we were a family legally, that's true, but it's not just for convenience. I care about you, Lucy. I admire you. You've shown me that honesty and kindness still exist. With you, I've found a place where I can be myself, without masks. For a second, Lucy remains still. The lamp above the table casts her diffuse shadow on the wall. Her eyes blink, surprised. The first thing she feels is astonishment. She never thought about getting married again, especially not under these circumstances. Then comes the doubt. Is it rushed? Is it just a practical move to facilitate adoption? But when she lifts her eyes to Gabriel, she sees sincerity. Nothing in his gaze reflects manipulation. On the contrary, she sees a man marked by pain, who has barely pieced himself together and who now extends his hand with humility. The honesty of his proposal disarms her. She remembers how Gabriel cares for Elias, how he protects the wetland, how he silently cries for his lost past. She remembers his dedication to truth, his refusal to yield to corruption, his newborn love for this small family constellation. Lucy, Andrei, Elias. Lucy feels a knot in her throat. The memory of her husband who disappeared in the sea weighs on her chest, but she also understands that clinging forever to that pain won't do justice to either her or her daughter. Now, with Gabriel, she sees a renewed opportunity. She isn't replacing anyone, but opening a new chapter where sincerity, respect, and empathy are the foundations. Gabriel, she says with a trembling voice. She notices his hand brushing hers. The warm skin of her fingers intertwines with his. This surprises me. I never thought about getting... She stops, swallows, and continues. But I believe you. I believe you when you say this is not just convenience. I see how you look at Elias, at Andrei, how every day you contribute something to my life, your perseverance, your integrity. It makes me feel valued, makes me think we can build something beautiful amid chaos. Her eyes well up, 2 tears glisten in the candlelight. Her heart beats with a mix of fear and hope. She could say no, that it's too soon, that better wait. But her intuition tells her that life is short, that second chances are rare, and that Gabriel has proven his nobility with actions. Moreover, by adopting Elias together, they will offer him a complete family, a stable and loving environment. Maybe not perfect, but real and warm. I accept, she whispers finally, softly, squeezing Gabriel's hand a little more. It's a hesitant and emotional yes that will strengthen with each shared day. Gabriel exhales, feeling a load lift. The look they share in that instant is a silent pact. There are no applause or witnesses, only the aroma of tea, the sleeping breaths of the children in nearby rooms, and the flickering glow of the candle's flame. But in that humble setting, something bigger than any luxury is forged. The commitment of 2 wounded people who have decided to join forces to create a family. He leans slightly forward, gently kisses Lucy's forehead. She responds with a caress on his cheek. Without ceremonies or protocol, they have just promised each other a shared future, full of challenges, yes, but also of the sincerity and mutual support they both silently longed for. As the night progresses, outside, the chirping of crickets envelops the house. Inside, the beating of two hearts synchronizes a little more, in rhythm with a promise born of honesty and tenderness. The rumor of the environmental reports has spread beyond the dusty streets of Puerto Ancla. A swarm of regional journalists, not too many, but enough to cause some uproar, descends upon the town, equipped with simple cameras, microphones, and notebooks. Elizabeth, the tireless biologist, has provided them with data, coordinates, photographs of illegal logging, and guides them to the areas where the mangrove roots poke out broken, wounded by greed. It's a sad spectacle, but also an opportunity to expose the corruption that gnaws at the natural balance. Gabriel finds himself under the lens and recorders. He speaks with serenity, aware that his words will echo beyond this forgotten place. He doesn't let the camera's lights intimidate him. He explains firmly his work as a park ranger, how he has observed furtive practices, illegal nets, bird traps, secret logging. He mentions the veiled threats he has received, the subtle and not-so-subtle pressures from Kyle and his men. The conviction in his eyes, reinforced by his past experience, grants him credibility that the journalists perceive with curiosity and respect. Media attention begins to pierce the wall of silence that surrounded Puerto Ancla. It's no longer just local rumors or whispers in the plaza. Now, the story travels through radio waves, digital pages, small regional TV channels. Authorities cannot look away with the same impunity. Kyle becomes restless. Elliot Smith, once untouchable, feels something breaking beneath his feet. One evening, like something out of a withered dream, Elliot and Helena Smith appear in the town. They arrive without the pomp of old times, without drivers or assistants, without dazzling jewelry. Elliot wears a suit that was once elegant, but now looks wrinkled, and Helena wears more austere makeup, her face tired, without the haughtiness that once shone in her pupils. The downfall of their businesses in the city, the decline of their influence, has pushed them to return to this coastal corner in search of a lifeline. They seek Gabriel. They find him on a path between the cabin and the coast, where the murmur of the sea is a constant backdrop. Elliot starts a speech. He talks about arrangements, mutually beneficial businesses. He offers him money, promises of some project that could replenish the town's economy. Helena nods beside him, without her former arrogance, as if wanting to avoid Gabriel's gaze. They try to convince him to stop pressuring, to abandon the reports, that media fame leads to nothing good. They paint a scenario where everyone benefits if Gabriel keeps quiet. A script so old and worn that it almost sounds ridiculous. Gabriel watches them as one contemplates two figures deformed by time and lies. Gone is the naive young man who was deceived by a charming smile and a prestigious surname. Now he looks at them with a hard serenity, a controlled fury behind his pupils. He doesn't respond. He doesn't bother to insult them. His silence, his total indifference, is the greatest contempt he can offer them. That muteness says more than any word. He doesn't believe them. He doesn't need them. He doesn't respect them. Elliot is left with the word frozen in his throat. Helena lowers her gaze, biting her lip, perhaps lamenting the ruin of her image, the loss of a power that was never authentic. Morally defeated, Elliot and Helena retreat, with the same discretion with which they arrived. There is no violent confrontation or shouting, only the weight of a past that can no longer bend to the present. Their flight leaves an aroma of rancid, of times that will not return in the air. Gabriel watches them leave without turning their face. This is his most subtle triumph, ignoring those who once dominated him with their shadow. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continues providing data to the journalists, showcasing the magnitude of environmental damage, the network of complicity within the municipality, and the documents proving corruption. The cameras capture the wetland and its scars, the injured mangrove, and the illegal nets pulled from the water. Reporters interview some fishermen who dare to speak, neighbors tired of silence, Diana, who recounts how poverty affects the children, and Lucy, who talks about the deteriorating health of the people due to lack of resources. The media spotlight penetrates the cracks, revealing dirty deals, marked letters, and buried threats. Kyle feels the noose tightening and becomes uneasy. Operating in the shadows is no longer so easy. Gabriel walks toward the coast at dusk. The sea whispers a melody of waves among the pier pilings. Every step he takes on the sand reminds him of who he is now, a man who knows betrayal and redemption. He has rejected the rot that Elliot and Helena represent, has overcome the deceit that destroyed his life in the city. He is no longer the victim of a plot, nor a pawn in someone else's chess game. He has a just cause, protecting the environment, denouncing traps, preserving the future of Puerto Ancla. He has a valuable and noble companion, Lucy, with whom he plans a shared life. And some children who motivate him, Andrei, with her innocent curiosity, Elias, with his newfound purity, even Diana, his sister, who continues trying to change her students' destinies despite the precariousness. The past reappeared to try to bend him again, but he encountered a different Gabriel, wiser, stronger, and with roots that do not yield to the wind. Now that local corruption is showing its face under the spotlights, the dignity that Gabriel defends begins to take tangible shape. It is a hope planted in the minds of the most skeptical neighbors. Perhaps, if this man managed to resist Elliot and Helena, if he did not succumb to Kyle, the community can also regain the voice they thought was lost. Night falls, speckled with stars. On the shore, Gabriel feels the sea breeze caress his face, the distant sound of a fishing boat, the flickering lights of journalists' cameras, and the muted voices in the streets form a tapestry of change. His past has returned to confront him, but he has learned from the pain. Now he stands firm, with the courage of one who has suffered and healed. As he contemplates the dark waters, he knows that the worst has passed and that there is still a path to walk. But this time, he does not walk alone. A family, a cause, and a town in need of hope accompany him. Dawn arrives with a gentle breeze and the singing of some early birds among the mangroves. Gabriel's cabin, nestled on wooden stilts in the heart of the wetland, appears a peaceful refuge. Luna, the mixed-breed dog he rescued some time ago, slips out from under the table upon hearing the first murmur of his voice. She wags her tail joyfully, her brown eyes reflecting trust and simple, unconditional affection. Gabriel pets her head, smiles tenderly. This morning routine, where the calm of the surroundings mixes with Luna's faithful companionship, comforts him. However, the serenity is deceptive. As he goes out to check the traps and illegal nets, Gabriel stops by the remnants of the food he left for Luna the night before. A strange, chemical, and penetrating smell hits his nose like a slap. Something is wrong. Before he can react, Luna emits a faint whimper. Her body begins to tremble, her legs weaken, and her breath accelerates into agitated gasps. Within seconds, the dog collapses onto the damp earth, shaking and breathing with difficulty. Gabriel's heart races. He knows what it means. Someone has poisoned the food. A cowardly attack against a defenseless being. Anger boils in his veins, but the urgency to save Luna takes over. He lifts her in his arms, feeling the warmth of her body shake with gentle convulsions. Without thinking twice, he runs through muddy paths and routes towards the village, with the dog dangling between his arms, legs swinging, muzzle open. Who would dare such cruelty? It's not hard to deduce Kyle or his thugs. One more step in his escalation of violence, a desperate attempt to intimidate Gabriel to stop denouncing illegal practices. Upon re-entering the cabin, with adrenaline still pumping, Gabriel finds overturned furniture, scattered tools, and strewn papers. The message is clear: don't meddle. But Gabriel will not be bowed. With Luna agonizing in his arms, he feels a cold rage rise from his stomach to his throat. At the village health center, Lucy works with determination and calm. Upon seeing Gabriel arrive with Luna, her eyes light up with concern. Andrea, peeking through the door, covers her mouth with her hands. Lucy places Luna on an improvised stretcher, while Elizabeth, who has arrived after hearing the rumors, brings activated charcoal, saline solution, and an animal first aid kit. Movements are urgent but precise. Lucy injects the saline, administers the activated charcoal to reduce the absorption of the poison, and pets Luna's neck to soothe her. Outside, the sunlight grows more intense, and footsteps of neighbors peeking out with curiosity and fear can be heard. Gabriel, with his hands clenched in white fists, bites his tongue to avoid cursing out loud. He feels how anger makes his arms tremble. Why attack a defenseless animal? This meanness exposes the true face of corruption. They do not hesitate to harm anyone, human or beast, to protect their interests. The news spreads quickly through the village. In the plaza, on the pier, in the little school where Diana teaches, everyone comments on the incident. Luna, the dog saved by Gabriel, now poisoned as a lesson. There are looks of indignation, clenched fists, murmurs that this time they have gone too far. Before, some looked at Gabriel with suspicion, thinking his reports could bring trouble. Now many understand that the problem already existed, and that Gabriel has only brought it to light. This act of cruelty becomes a turning point. Elizabeth takes advantage of the uproar to send more reports to higher environmental authorities, with copies to the journalists who recently visited the village. Pressure increases. In the face of evidence of vandalism and violence, they can no longer ignore the reports. Environmental authorities announce a visit to investigate, a step Kyle had been evading. The gears begin to move, not as quickly as desired, but at least they are moving. Kyle, in the shadows of his shady businesses, gets agitated. He feels the noose tightening, that impunity is cracking. His men return his nervous glances, aware that they no longer act in the shadows. The poison on Luna, instead of cowarding Gabriel and the town, has had the opposite effect: indignation, and an indignation that begins to articulate into resistance. As night falls, the clinic is a haven of warm light. Luna, weak but alive, wags her tail with effort upon recognizing Gabriel's voice. He kneels beside her, pets her head with tearful eyes. Lucy affirms she will recover, that the treatment was effective. Andrea watches from a corner, hugging a doll, and Elias sleeps in a nearby crib. The budding family that Gabriel has formed with Lucy is here, safe, but marked by external violence. Outside, the nocturnal wind caresses the walls. The people in the village comment on the news with more anger than fear. They understand that the enemy is not Gabriel or his reports, but the greed and corruption that led to poisoning an indefensible dog. This collective recognition is a crucial step. Gabriel perceives it and feels a firmer determination taking root in his chest. He will not be intimidated, will not abandon his work. If Kyle thinks violence will make him back down, he is wrong. There are too many lives at stake, too much truth and justice pending. That night, as Luna rests with still somewhat irregular breathing, Gabriel remains awake, sitting on the edge of a stool. He watches Lucy preparing a cup of tea, Andrea immersed in an old book, and baby Elias sleeping peacefully. He thinks of Diana, Elizabeth, the people who now raise their voices. He thinks of the announced visit of environmental authorities, a light of hope amidst the corrupt darkness. He thinks of Kyle's dirty hand, which no longer hides so well. And so, at the slow rhythm of Luna's breathing, and with the warm certainty of having allies, Gabriel understands that his battle is not solitary. The poison spilled on an animal's food has become an antidote against indifference. The seed of resistance has been planted deeper. From this wound, the town will emerge stronger and more aware of who the true enemy is. The evening light tints the wetland with orange hues. The cabin, although marked by the traces of vandalism, still stands firm on its stilts. Gabriel, with a hammer in hand, adjusts a board over a damaged corner of the porch. Every hammer blow is a promise of resistance. The sea breeze, soft and salty, caresses his nape as he strives to make this refuge habitable again. Suddenly, he hears light footsteps. Lucy appears, carrying a basket of food and some medicine jars she managed to gather. Behind her, Andrei walks carefully, holding Elias, who babbles with his baby voice, amazed by the mangroves and canals dancing in the twilight light. Luna, the bandaged and still somewhat unstable dog, pokes her muzzle through the ajar door and approaches the group, wagging her tail slowly, happy to feel her family reunited. Gabriel leaves the hammer aside, approaches to greet them. Lucy hands him the basket, with a sweet smile that contrasts with the hardness of recent weeks. Inside, on the wooden floor, Andrei places Elias. The girl shows him her hands, then gently claps them together rhythmically. The little one imitates her, clumsy and happy, clapping his tiny hands. Their laughter, clean and crystal clear, fills the space, enveloping the cabin with a warmth that the cracks in the wood cannot overshadow. Gabriel and Lucy go out to the porch, leaving the children to entertain themselves inside under the attentive gaze of Luna, who has settled in a corner, still weak but recovering. The breeze brings the smell of salt and damp leaves. A nocturnal bird rehearses its song, and the whisper of the mangrove roots caresses the ear like an old lullaby. They sit together, Gabriel with his hands on his knees and Lucy with her arms crossed, watching the horizon. They have decided to marry, and that weighs on them, but not as a burden, but as a promise. Gabriel feels compelled to be honest more than ever. He sighs, lowers his head and murmurs, "I'm scared. Scared of repeating mistakes, of not giving you, Andrea, Elias, the life you deserve, of failing you, of not being up to the task." Lucy listens attentively. She too carries scars, has known loss and loneliness, but her hand naturally seeks Gabriel's. Their fingers intertwine, warm and firm. "You've already given us something more valuable," Lucy says in a serene voice. "Truth, empathy, dignity. Those cannot be bought or sold, and they are the best foundation for a family." Gabriel feels a lump in his throat. He thinks about his past, about Helena, Elliot, and all the lies woven for him. Here there are no masks or empty promises. With Lucy and the children, everything is fragile but genuine. No luxuries or appearances, only people trying to rise amidst a harsh environment. His future wife doesn't need grand speeches, just sincerity, and he has learned that honesty is a more durable strength than any property or fleeting luxury. "I don't know what the future holds," he admits, lifting his gaze to meet hers. "But I want to face whatever comes at your side, not just for Elias's adoption, but because you've taught me to believe again, to trust." Lucy nods, her eyes slightly misty. Outside, Andrea's and Elias's voices continue playing, the tapping of their tiny hands echoing like applause at dusk. Luna growls softly, settling down to nap. The nocturnal bird releases a few notes, exploring the melody of silence. Despite its damages, the cabin feels more like home than ever. Every hammer blow Gabriel struck today adds to a greater effort, to consolidate a space without deceit, without violence, without threats. A place where family, this family forged in adversity, can flourish. With their hands intertwined, Gabriel and Lucy remain silent for a few more moments. They need no words to understand that their bond goes beyond a piece of paper, a procedure, a legal convenience. They have arrived here carrying guilt, pain, and defeats, and yet they have found and chosen each other. That creates a deep intimacy, without barriers. When the sun finishes setting and night begins its reign, the dim lamp inside the cabin shows Andrea trying to coax a broader laugh out of Elias. The baby claps, the girl laughs, Luna sighs in her sleep, and the couple on the porch smiles at such simplicity. In this minimal scene, the entire world fits, and with it, the hope of a better future. Night stretches over Puerto Ancla, under a mantle of faint stars, barely visible through the marine haze. Ivan walks along a side street, away from the center and curious eyes. His hands are in his pockets, shoulders hunched, as if trying to hide in his chest the weight of a decision that torments him. The air smells briny, mixed with rancid fish and damp wood, pressing down on the atmosphere. A few meters ahead, behind a post where the lamplight barely reaches, two hard-looking men wait. They are Kyle's thugs, clear in their rough manners and opaque stares that reflect neither pity nor curiosity. They have summoned Ivan here with a simple yet terrible offer, easy money in exchange for silence. They want him, should he discover illegal logging, traps and dirty maneuvers, to turn a blind eye, to become a passive ally of crime, a proposal that sounds like a death sentence. Ivan's stomach churns. He thinks about his circumstances, his poverty, his lack of opportunities. The tempting money presents itself as the key to escaping stagnation, to giving Diana the life she deserves, to imagining a more comfortable future. But the cost is high. Accepting means soiling his conscience and betraying everything Diana and Gabriel stand for. It means deepening the wound the town already suffers. Just as he's about to open his mouth, something breaks the night's stillness. Diana appears running, her face contorted with anguish and determination. She has guessed Ivan's intentions, realized he was about to cross a point of no return. Her voice rises, trembling but firm, echoing against the battered walls of nearby houses. If you do this, Ivan, what future will we have? What example will you set for our children, for our neighbors? Gabriel is risking everything for the town, Lucy for everyone's well-being, and you're going to sell out? The question pierces Ivan's chest like a stake. The thugs exchange impatient glances. One clicks his tongue in irritation. They expected a quick, dirty transaction, free of moral lectures or inconvenient witnesses. Ivan looks at the shadows around him, the silent streets, the faint reflection of the moon in stagnant puddles. He sees Diana's face, her voice trembling with anger and fear. He observes Kyle's men, waiting impatiently for his answer. He thinks of the recent past, the fire at Cecilia's house, Gabriel's steadfastness in enduring humiliation, Lucy's tenderness caring for Elias and Andrea, the environmental reports trying to restore balance. He remembers the broken promises of projects that never arrived, the oppression that weighs in the air under corruption. If he accepts, there will be no return. He will see himself in the mirror, unable to hold his own gaze. He will become another accomplice, burying the town's roots, dooming it to rot. His stomach clenches, his heart pounds violently. Then he sets his jaw and, in a hoarse voice, says, "No, I'm not going to do it." The thugs curse under their breath, hurl insults, sneer at Diana and Ivan. They know they cannot push too hard without drawing more suspicion. They leave, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones and fading into the darkness. Ivan watches them go, feeling an immense burden lift from his shoulders. It would have been so easy to give in, but so devastating. Diana approaches him slowly. Tears shine in her eyes, a mix of relief and joy. She hugs him without speaking at first, feeling the warmth of his body and understanding that tonight they have crossed a threshold. Ivan has chosen a harder path, decided not to stain his hands with dirty money. Poverty will continue to nip at their heels, but their dignity remains intact. And in a place so wounded, that is a luminous hope. "Thank you," Diana whispers, voice breaking as she strokes Ivan's nape. He nods, speechless. He understands that being part of the solution rather than the problem won't make him rich immediately, but it aligns him with those fighting for a different tomorrow. Gabriel with his reports, Lucy with her tireless work, Elizabeth with her documentation, Andrea and Elias, the next generation, deserve a clean example. That night, as he walks back with Diana, Ivan feels the air lighter. Now he stands with those who want to protect the natural environment, to care for the mangrove, the birds, the sea, and the town's integrity. He knows it won't be easy, that reprisals may loom, but he has taken a crucial step. He has rejected the bribe, said no to corruption, proving that dignified poverty is more valuable than tainted wealth. From now on, Ivan is one more member of the small group Gabriel has inspired, ready to lend his shoulder and voice to defend Puerto Ancla. In the quiet night, with Diana's hand entwined in his, he understands that his love for her and for the future they can build is worth more than any amount of dirty bills. There, beneath the stars, another silent promise of resistance and hope is sealed. Morning light in Puerto Ancla filters through the fishing nets hanging on the pier. This time, however, there are new spectators, environmental journalists with simple cameras, plastic microphones, and wrinkled notebooks. They've come, drawn by Elizabeth's and Gabriel's reports and revelations. They settle in without ceremony, standing among rusted boats and whitewashed facades, searching for images that tell the story of a town besieged by corruption and environmental plunder. Elizabeth moves confidently among them, showing photos and notes, not faltering under their questions. She displays the traces of logging around the mangroves, the metal traps, the illegal submerged nets. She firmly explains the crucial role these wetlands play in sustaining the ecosystem, protecting the coast, filtering water, and providing habitat for dozens of species. The flurry of questions, camera clicks, and pen scribbles fill the air. Off to the side, Gabriel watches the scene, heart in his throat. He, who never dreamed of fame or spotlight, must now explain himself before lenses and microphones. He approaches a group of journalists, trying to remain calm. Using simple words, without grand rhetoric, he describes how the mangrove acts as a natural shield against erosion, how marine and terrestrial biodiversity depend on this balance, how coastal communities lived for centuries in harmony with their environment until greed shattered the order. He also confesses to the threats he's received, Luna's poisoning, the intimidation toward him and his cabin. Each of his words is a drop of truth falling into the muddy waters of cover-up. At a distance, Kyle spies on them. Hidden behind a post in the plaza, he watches with a furrowed brow as his shady dealings come to light. Rage boils in his veins. He had tried intimidation, bribery, manipulation from the shadows. Now, with the press spotlights illuminating dark corners, his maneuvering room shrinks. For a moment, he clenches his teeth, thinking of one last blow to discredit Gabriel. Perhaps a fire at the forest's edge, something that looks like the ranger's negligence, or a scheme to frame Gabriel for a catastrophe. Anything to divert attention, to suggest that the problem isn't logging or smuggling, but the supposed carelessness of those who report. But the town is not blind. The presence of the press encourages many neighbors to step out of their homes, peek through windows, and approach the plaza timidly. Some want to tell their story, others to lend silent support. Some, once skeptical, now understand that the world is watching, and that gives them the courage to speak up. The looks are no longer just resigned. An unexpected courage emerges, a collective desire not to be dragged further into the mire. No one wants Puerto Ancla to go down in history as a place of destruction and silence, but rather as a town that rose up and defended its environment. Diana, behind the windows of the small school, tells her students what's happening. Journalists asking questions, neighbors talking, a lively debate breaking through apathy. Ivan, still shaken by his recent choice to reject the bribe, watches from the market's corner. He ponders the importance of this moment. It's time to choose sides, to refuse to be Kyle's puppet. Meanwhile, Lucy cares for Elias and Andrei, not losing sight of Gabriel in the distance, watching him explain simply to the cameras. She feels pride and a growing tenderness for that man who, without intending it, has become a moral compass for the community. Kyle leaves with a furrowed brow, muttering curses under his breath. He has a plan, a dark idea, one last trap. But this time, the seed of resistance has already sprouted. The entire town feels the faint tremor of change. Indignation ripens into determination, And the cameras, the microphones, the handwritten notes promise to carry the story beyond Puerto Ancla's borders. In the dusk's half-light, the journalists put away their equipment, jotting down their final impressions. Some leave that very night. Others will sleep in improvised lodgings. What they have witnessed here is not just destruction. They have seen the dignity of a park ranger who fought against fear, the firmness of a biologist who exposed evidence, the quiet commitment of a community beginning to awaken. They know that media attention has stirred stagnant waters, and now it's harder for the guilty parties to act in broad daylight without consequences. Tension rises, yes, but so does hope. Puerto Ancla does not surrender. The nocturnal song of seabirds and the murmur of waves against the pier accompany the last conversations between neighbors and reporters. The same question lingers in everyone's mind. What comes next? With press pressure, the town's courage, and Gabriel's determination, only time will tell if corruption recedes like a filthy tide or attempts one final strike. The only sure thing is that the story is no longer a secret among mangroves. The cameras will leave, notes will be published, and the name of Puerto Ancla will echo in other ports, in distant cities, in official offices. This time, truth will not drown in silence. The moon shines with a pale glow, a milky disk in the dark sky. The coastal wind carries smells of salt, algae, and unease. Beyond the sea's murmur, at the forest's edge, hooded figures move with furtive steps. They carry fuel cans in their hands and very carefully douse the dry undergrowth, the dead leaves crunching beneath their feet. They do not speak. Silence is their accomplice. Suddenly, a spark, a tiny flare, and the flames surge red and hungry, clinging to trunks, rising in bright spirals toward the sky. The fire ignites with fury, like a monster awakened from a long, unhealthy slumber. Not far away in the cabin, Gabriel and Lucy dine by the trembling light of a lamp. Andrei and Elias sleep in neighboring cribs, their breathing soft and innocent. The smell of fire, the acrid smoke, take a few seconds to arrive, but when they do, Gabriel tenses immediately. Lucy, frowning, lifts her head from her plate, frightened. A neighbor running outside shouts a warning, "Fire! Fire at the forest entrance!" Elizabeth, Diana, and Ivan sense the threat almost simultaneously. Some townspeople, surprised in the middle of the night, grab buckets, blankets, anything that might help tame the flames. There are no equipped firefighters, no powerful hoses, no fireproof suits. There is only the town's willpower, solidarity stronger than terror. The rumor of fire spreads through Puerto Ancla's streets, faster than the sparks flying into the sky. Before rushing into action, Gabriel ensures his family's safety. Lucy, her eyes bright with worry, picks up Andrei and Elias, wrapping them warmly and taking them to safety, away from the smoke. Luna, the recovered dog, growls nervously from a corner, sensing danger. Gabriel kisses Lucy's forehead. Their gazes cross in silent agreement. He will return, do what's necessary. She nods, without tears or reproach, understanding the urgency. Then, without hesitation, Gabriel runs toward the fire. Ivan, jaw clenched, follows closely. Elizabeth arrives with a cloth over her mouth and nose, while Diana brings buckets filled from the common well. Other neighbors have already formed an improvised chain, passing containers of water, beating the flames with wet branches, throwing dirt to extinguish the emerging hotspots. The scene resembles a chaotic dance under the pale moon. Silhouettes blackened by soot, calloused hands holding liquid hope, bent backs under the strain. The heat is suffocating. Smoke stings the eyes. The crackle of burning wood sounds like a lament. Yet no one retreats. Men, women, young and old alike, everyone fights stubbornly. They are defending more than trees. They defend their land, their way of life, the memory of ancestors who once fished in clean waters, the future promise of children growing up respecting their environment. Gabriel sees in each face a reason to keep going. Here, there are no enemies, only allies against a common evil. Ivan, drenched in sweat and ashes, feels with every drop rolling down his brow the difference between the cowardice of selling out and the dignity of protecting something valuable. Now he knows that refusing corruption was the first step, and this heroic act, however modest, is the second. Every shovelful of dirt he throws on the flames, every bucket of water he empties to lessen the blaze, confirms he chose the right path. Beside him, Elizabeth curses under her breath at the sight of a burning root, but immediately receives help from a neighbor passing her a damp blanket to smother the flames. Diana, heart in her throat, doesn't give up despite exhaustion. The collective strength overcomes physical fatigue. No one calls for a truce. Everyone's will converges on a single goal: saving the forest. Gabriel's muscles burn, his lungs beg for clean air. He thinks of Lucy and the children, of Luna, of the cabin and the wetlands he guards. He also thinks of Kyle and his thugs, of the vileness of starting a fire just to destabilize the truth. Tonight, however, the criminal plan hits a human wall of courage. Under the firelight, the community becomes a single creature that refuses to be tamed by terror. Gradually, through sheer tenacity, the fire yields. Not without leaving scars on the land, not without consuming some undergrowth and charring some trunks, but without spreading to total destruction. After hours, with trembling arms and throats rasped by smoke, everyone watches the embers dying. Silence now is a collective sigh. Some hug each other, others cry silently. Some collapse to their knees, exhausted but victorious. Ivan raises his gaze to the pale moon still there, unperturbed. He thinks of past temptations, how easily he could have fallen into rot. Now, sweaty and with dirt under his nails, he feels clean, part of something bigger and nobler. Gabriel places an arm around Elizabeth's shoulder, thanking her without words. Diana exhales a ragged sigh and smiles, her face smeared with soot. The whole town, in its modesty, has created an epic image. Humble people, under moonlight, protecting their environment and their dignity. When they return to their homes, still tasting bitter smoke on their tongues, they know that tonight they have struck a blow against despair. Those who wanted to sow terror with fire found a wall of bravery. And so, in the heart of darkness, the fire of collective courage shone brighter than the flames themselves. A new dawn arrives, grayish light filtering through lingering smoke. The air smells of burnt wood and damp earth. The silhouettes of charred trunks stand against the sky, mute witnesses to the fiery night. A few ashes swirl in the wind, clinging to the clothes of those inspecting the aftermath. But the tragedy failed to achieve its goal. The fire did not reach the forest's heart. The mangroves remained standing. Life was not devoured. The press, which yesterday recorded tension between accusations and threats, now documents the consequences of collective courage. Simple cameras focus on the blackened soil, on neighbors' bandaged hands that battled flames with buckets and branches. The interviews change in tone. Now they are not only complaints, but stories of resistance, unity, and valor. Gabriel, his face dirty with soot and eyes reddened by smoke, explains that what happened proves the town's strength when it refuses to give up. Elizabeth shows photos of the area before the fire, comparing them to the charred landscape now. Diana, Ivan, Lucy, and others offer their testimonies, their voices trembling between exhaustion and the satisfaction of having defended their land. The media pressure, combined with documented evidence, photos, recordings, written complaints, Luna's poisoning, the deliberate fire, leaves no room for indifference. The regional police, who previously responded with evasions or slowness, are now forced to act seriously. Reinforcements arrive in dusty trucks and worn uniforms. This time, delay is not enough to dodge the truth. With the nation's gaze fixed on Puerto Ancla, corruption has nowhere to hide. The raid happens quietly, without movie drama. Kyle and his men are arrested. They are handcuffed, placed into police vehicles. Their once haughty looks crumble as they try to feign innocence, before cameras capturing every gesture. Mayor Martin, who for months looked the other way, waits in his office with a sullen face. When citizens gather in the plaza demanding explanations, he has no choice but to resign. He leaves with his head bowed, no applause or lament, only the murmur of the crowd watching him pass by like a worthless spectre. Elliot and Helena Smith watch the downfall from a distance. Their power, once unshakable, melts away like a wax mask in the sun. Without the capital that once let them manipulate wills, without their local authority connections, they're now just two uncomfortable travelers with light luggage and weary faces. Their time in Puerto Ancla is over. No one supports them now, no one to manipulate. Resigned, they depart for the capital, carrying the bitter taste of moral defeat. Their names, which once shone in luxurious halls, now provoke shrugs and muffled rumors. Gabriel witnesses this outcome without malicious glee. He does not celebrate their downfall with cruelty. He feels a bitter relief, as if he had finally dropped a heavy lead weight he carried in his chest. They can no longer harm him, no more ropes around his neck. The deceit that cost him his freedom and almost his life is behind him. Still, the memory lingers, a scar that will never fully disappear. But now he owns his destiny, can breathe without Elliot and Helena's shadows over his shoulder. The community, aware of its victory, rises stronger. No one forgets the ashes, the wounds, the sweat soaking their brows in the dead of night, the silent tears when oppression seemed invincible. But they understand that from the ruins of corruption and fire, they have regained control of their story. Dignity, solidarity, and love for their land and people have allowed them to resist and triumph. This moment marks a before and after in Puerto Ancla. They are no longer a subdued village, but a community aware of its power and worth. As the sun sets, the song of seabirds mixes with neighbors' conversations. Some have bandaged hands, others have wounded knees. Everyone is dusty and sooty. Yet what matters is the light shining from their eyes, the understanding that together they can overcome injustice. And so, with the relief of a duty fulfilled, they face the future with steady resolve, ready to rebuild what was damaged and to forever protect the environment that saw them born. Morning in Puerto Ancla gleams cleaner, without the weight of blatant corruption. The salty air and sunlight seem kinder to people who gradually resume their routines with a renewed sense of pride. However, amid this calm forged in the ashes of injustice, Jessica bursts into the plaza, howling her demands. She appears with disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, and a hoarse voice demanding money. She claims that Elias is her biological son and threatens to take him away, to cause a scandal if they don't pay. But the town is not the same anymore. After witnessing Kyle's downfall, the mayor's resignation, and the Smiths' flight, the neighbors have learned to distinguish honesty from manipulation. Despite the tension her speech tries to provoke, people surround Jessica not with panic, but with annoyance and distrust. Murmurs rise. "Isn't she the one who abandoned the baby in the forest?" an old man whispers. "What kind of mother sells her child and then demands money?" adds a woman with rough hands. The looks aimed at Jessica are full of incredulity and disdain. No one takes her side. They are no longer a fearful town swayed by gossip and pressure. They have seen too many lies and suffered too much to tolerate another crude manipulation. Gabriel and Lucy step forward, holding Elias in their arms. Lucy cradles the child gently, and Gabriel stands firmly beside her. Andrea, Lucy's daughter, takes her place next to them and with a spontaneous gesture holds Elias's tiny hand. The contrast is powerful. This improvised family, born of hardship and struggle, represents tenderness, protection, and honesty. Unaware of the scene, Elias babbles, kicking the air with his little feet. Andrea smiles at him, and Gabriel and Lucy exchange a serene look that disarms any threat. Jessica writhes like a cornered animal, seeing that no one defends her, that the faces around her show weariness, not fear. The police, more alert after so many recent events, watch from a corner, taking notes. The press, still roaming the town for stories, frames the scene with their cameras. Jessica is captured for what she is, a ruthless opportunist, ready to bargain with a child's innocence to make a profit. "If you don't pay me, I'll scream everywhere that the child was stolen from me." She hurls her threat into the air, pathetic and devoid of strength. But the town does not cower. The people murmur more loudly, irritated that she would try to taint a moment of communal rebirth. Someone in the crowd says aloud, "If the child is yours, why didn't you care for him when he needed it?" Another adds, "Go away, Jessica. You're not fooling anyone here anymore." Gabriel and Lucy remain silently firm. They know they don't need to raise their voices, insult or shove. Their mere presence, Elias in their arms and Andrea firmly by their side, is an irrefutable statement of love and responsibility. The town understands without speeches. Gabriel and Lucy have adopted the child not because of papers or convenience, but due to the bond they have formed, the protection they have offered from the start. Elias, once abandoned and fragile, is now the center of a family that doesn't crumble before blackmail. Jessica, realizing that no one responds to her provocations, that the cameras show her as an absent mother reappearing only for money, spits an insult into the air and leaves with her head down, dragging her feet over the cobblestones. No one follows her, no one asks her to stay. They simply step aside, letting her pass in disgrace. With this public act, Elias's moral adoption is sealed in the community's eyes. Not just the legal papers, which will surely come in time, but also the recognition of those who have seen how Gabriel and Lucy cared for him, loved him, and protected him, without asking for anything in return. Oblivious to the drama, the baby laughs when he feels Lucy's gentle caress on his cheek. Andrea, proud, shows him how to clap his hands, and Elias, with childish enthusiasm, tries his best to imitate her. Tired of farces, the town prefers silence to feeling pity for Jessica. The looks directed at Gabriel, Lucy, Andrea, and Elias reflect approval. They have chosen their family with both heart and actions, and that choice is a shield against any form of extortion. Thus, without violence or scandal, it becomes clear who Elias's true parents are, not only by law, but by their very nature. The entire community nods, acknowledging love's victory over greed, sincerity over threats. No desperate cry will alter their chosen path. Elias grows surrounded by human warmth, friendly hands, and a future worth believing in. Morning wakes under a sky so intensely blue, it seems freshly painted. The sea breeze caresses the cheeks of those present, carrying the scent of salt and hope. On Puerto Ancla's beach, a simple ceremony is about to take place. No luxuries or blaring protocols, just an improvised arbor made of branches and wildflowers, plastic chairs lined up on the sand, and a table with refreshments. Simplicity marks this wedding that promises to seal a union born of honesty and second chances. Off to one side, Andrea holds a small bouquet of wildflowers she has gathered with care. She feels important, wearing a simple yet clean dress, her face lit by a bright smile. Next to her, Diana carries Elias, the baby whose fate intertwined the lives of Gabriel and Lucy. The child babbles happily, waving his little hands at the sun. Ivan, standing beside Diana, wears a calm expression. His decision to reject corruption and join the just cause of the town is reflected in every one of his gestures. Elizabeth, for once without her field notebook, applauds with sincere enthusiasm, moved to see how the seeds of effort yield fruits that no blazing forest can consume. The community has gathered. Neighbors who once were distrustful now watch the scene with shy smiles that grow with each passing second. They have seen Gabriel grow through adversity, have known Lucy in her role as a paramedic, a mother, and a pillar of moral strength. They know this wedding is not mere formality. It symbolizes a family that has emerged from the ruins, with honesty, love, and the desire to protect the life and natural environment around them. Gabriel, dressed in a simple white shirt, waits under the arbor. The sea's murmur accompanies his heartbeat. Lucy approaches with calm steps, wearing a modest but elegant cotton dress, her hair tied back with a light-colored ribbon. There are no violins or canned music. The sound of the waves and the occasional cry of a seagull form the perfect soundtrack. When they stand together, face to face, with Andrei and Elias very close by, they take each other's hands. The officiant, an elderly villager with a deep, kind voice, speaks a few simple words about the importance of respect, truth, and mutual care. There are no long speeches or unreachable promises, only the certainty of the road traveled and the determination to continue forward. Gabriel offers a simple ring to Lucy. It's a humble band, no diamonds, but polished with care. In a voice firm yet gentle, he declares, "Together, we will build a family based on honesty, respect, and care for the life around us." Lucy, eyes shining, places a similar ring on Gabriel's finger, whispering almost inaudibly, "I will make your hand my refuge, and our home a beacon of hope." Andrea holds the flowers, holding her breath in excitement. Elias, in Diana's arms, lets out a little laugh that seems to bless the scene. Ivan, leaning against a post, crosses his arms and nods admiringly. Elizabeth applauds, infecting others with her joy. Gradually, the neighbors burst into applause, not loud or false, but clapping in a rhythm that harmonizes with the waves, as if nature itself gave its approval. The sea is a silent and profound witness. It reflects the sun on the waves, creating glimmers on the surface like sparks of light, celebrating the union. It's not jewels that matter, nor pomp. It's the conviction Gabriel and Lucy have forged by overcoming betrayals, poverty, threats, and fire. It's the faith that, with their love, they can raise Elias and guide Andrea toward a more just future, more aware of the value of every living being. When the ceremony ends, without loud music or a lavish feast, the couple embraces as the town watches in silence. Then laughter, simple words, and shared refreshments seal the moment. The warm sand underfoot, the sea foam, Andrea's bouquet, Elias's babbling, the community's quiet complicity. All of this is the essence of this wedding. Under an intensely blue sky and the ocean's murmur, Gabriel and Lucy begin a new stage. In their union beats not only the love they profess for each other, but also the promise to care for this land, these people, and the future they have helped build. The sea, eternal witness, keeps the reflection of their joy in its eyes, knowing that despite everything, life continues to break through in the sands of Puerto Ancla. Months later, the landscape has changed. The time of threats is behind them, and Puerto Ancla shows signs of regeneration. The marks of the fire and corruption still exist, but no longer dominate the place. Among the areas blackened by the flames, new shoots emerge, small green beings fighting for life, driven by human effort and nature's patience. Gabriel traverses the forest in his park ranger uniform, carrying the respect he has earned through honesty. His work, far from previous tensions, is to maintain the balance between human activities and the environment that sustains them. Fishing, once chaotic, is now carefully regulated. There are shifts, supervision, clear limits. The sea and wetlands are no longer easy prey for greed, but valuable partners to honor. Elizabeth coordinates mangrove restoration projects. She gathers young people from the village into workshops, showing them how to plant and care for new seedlings, teaching them to understand the interwoven roots and the fertile mud that shelters so many creatures. Ivan joins these community initiatives with enthusiasm. He helps at local fairs, organizes ecological tours, repairs tools that benefit everyone. In the little school, Diana uses recent history as teaching material. This is what happens when a town stands together, she tells her students, showing them that courage, honesty, and solidarity aren't abstract concepts, but forces capable of transforming reality. Lucy, a well-regarded paramedic, treats her patients with a renewed smile. She smiles because she has regained faith in people, in the social fabric that supports her work. Every wound she bandages, every health tip she gives, becomes an act of reaffirmation. The community is now healthier, not only in body, but also in spirit. Andrei and Elias grow quickly. The girl runs with Elias among the sand and the aerial roots of the mangroves, discovering insects, listening to the birds, and splashing near the fishing boats. Luna, the rescued dog, accompanies them, wagging her tail with no trace of past fear. Her cheerful barks, the children's laughter, and the murmur of the sea create a soothing soundtrack. At dusk, when the day's tasks are done, Gabriel takes a familiar path. He walks toward the humble cemetery, a place where the graves are simple, the crosses wooden, and the headstones unadorned. There rests Cecilia, his mother. He stops before her grave and leaves the wildflowers he has gathered with care. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the sea breeze cool his face, and in silence he tells his mother that he has found his true wealth. It isn't in luxury or fame, nor in the hollow promises that once enticed him. It lies in the family he has built with Lucy, Andrei, and Elias, in the integrity with which he faced hardships, in sincere love, solidarity, and respect for life. He feels a profound peace, as if Cecilia responded with an invisible murmur, approving his steps. Puerto Ancla is no longer a town suffocated by fear, but a community that has learned to rise from the ashes. The scars are not denied, they remain as lessons. Yet seeds of honesty, resilience, and affection have sprouted amid adversity. What happened has shown that the human spirit, when it clings to true values, can triumph over corruption and injustice. Night falls gently, stars shining over the sea, and Gabriel makes his way back. On the horizon, the faint lights of houses reflect a warm domesticity. He knows that upon arriving, he will find Lucy with a cup of hot tea, the children tired from play, and Luna dozing by the door. He knows that in that home, in the town streets, in the wetlands and fishing nets, a renewal lives in harmony, a life filled with meaning, anchored in love, truth, and mutual care. And so we end this story that was born of adversity, yet blossomed in honesty, love, and respect for the life around us. From Puerto Ancla, we take away a great lesson. Even amid ashes and pain, it is possible to raise one's voice, to unite, to heal wounds, and to rebuild with dignity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through forests, wetlands, and courageous hearts. Each of you, with your perspective and your words, has been part of the transformation of a town that chose not to surrender to injustice. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel to join us on future adventures. Now, the sea breeze carries our voices away, but the message remains. With empathy, courage, and kindness, we can forge a more just, sustainable, and meaningful world. Until next time, and thank you for being here.